growing sections for business listings and community groups, a comprehensive veterans area, local news, lots of pictures of life in Hopkinton, hours and hours of television programming, I mean naturally, and lots of other things that won't
Good evening and welcome to the Hopkinton School Committee Thursday, September 7th, 2023 meeting, regular meeting of the school committee. I just want to remind people that we are, this meeting is being recorded. Before I want to call the meeting to order, but before we conduct our business, I did want to have a moment of silence for an employee who passed away recently, if you want to.
Sure, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, I'd like to take a moment of silence. We lost one of our custodians last week. His name is Tony De Silva. He worked at the middle school for 9 years, and he finally lost his battle with cancer. So we could just take a moment.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think all of our condolences to Tony's family.
Yes.
So I'd like to have people who are here in the audience to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so on our agenda here, it does say that we have a recognition for a welcome to Jack Ionelli, who is our student representative who will be coming to our meetings. Unfortunately, the heat has thrown things off a little bit, and he had an athletic competition that was moved from what would have been earlier in the day to later to make it safer playing conditions. So we will not have him tonight, but we will have him at our next meeting. I think, did you have any other recognitions down on this end?
I have incorporated mine into my superintendent's report.
Okay, so that's great.
All right.
Anybody else? Okay, that's great. Then normally we would have public comment at this time. I do not see any members of the public here in the studio, so we will move on to that into your superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for September 7th, 2023. As we all know, we have had 4 days of extreme heat, and so I did just want to have a little shout out to, as Mr. Lebrad put it earlier today, all of the people who are sweating. But it has been amazing that our students, faculty, paraprofessionals, our nurses, counselors, the custodians and maintenance staff, I mean, the maintenance staff was out lining the fields yesterday. So
Wow.
people are working really hard. The cafeteria staff, you can imagine how hot it gets in those kitchens, tech staff, the admin assistants and support staff, our school bus drivers, you know, in some of those 77-seat buses have a lot of children. Our coaches, our administrators, and I hope I haven't left anyone off that list, but I've been in the schools today, and the second floor of Elmwood was really warm. I was amazed when I walked in because the cafeteria was actually pretty cool. And that came as a result of our custodians getting those about 4 industrial-sized fans and setting them up so the air just kept moving. And that caf felt really cool. However, if you went up to the 3rd floor, it was not really cool up there. And I visited some classrooms. Christine McCarthy's classroom sort of stands out to me because she was up at the front of that room teaching a math lesson. The kids were all on the floor raising their hands, and it was really good to see such powerful teaching and learning, and I want to thank everyone who made that happen because it's been tough out there this week, and I'm proud. So thank you. Nope, this is me. So some things in this report tonight. Just a very quick recap, end of summer ESY stuff. Mr. Lebrad will share with you some information from the new educator orientation. We've got some quick pictures from opening day. We have the U.S. News and World Report ranking for Hopkinton High School. A quick update on Marathon construction, which we will not be doing much longer because that project is almost over. And then just a really quick snapshot of our beginning trainings with Munis. So with ESY, this was shared with me by Abby Hanscom. We had 161 students who attended ESY ages from preschool all the way to age 22. 23 of those students were pre-K kids, 70 of them were grades K to 5, and this is the number that makes me feel really good. We had 68 students from grades 6 to 12 and the 18 to 22 kids come to ESY. And you know, as kids get older, it's easier to say, oh, that's not something I want to do, and I'm really thrilled that those kids were so committed to learning in the summer. We employed 68 staff, and of those folks, 16 were teachers, 48 paraprofessionals, 2 nurses, 2 speech and language pathologists, 1 OT, 1 PT, 1 counselor, and 1 BCBA. And Abby Hanscom wants to say thank you, and so do I, to all of the people who participated in ESY this year, especially Beth Callahan, because with the departure of our team chair who usually runs ESY, Mr. Dan Major, Beth stepped in and just ran it for us, which was great. And we have 2 folks who are willing to share the duties of ESY for next year. They will be co-coordinators, and that's Kim Goodwin and Ashley Smirlis. So great news there. And I will hand things over to you for a moment.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. Good evening, everybody. We go through a lot of rites of passage when we start the new school year, kids coming, shining up classrooms. We also get to welcome a new crop of educators. And this year, as you can see on your screen, there's a shot of the 33 educators who are joining the Hopkinton Public Schools this year. I should quickly add, this does not include our para-educators who are also joining us. In this shot, you can see teachers, you can see counselors, you can see nurses, you can see English language teachers, you can see special educators and related service providers. Of this group, 3 of them are brand new to the education profession. 9 of them are actually HPS employees who are now in a different position, and 21 of them are educators with prior experience that they're bringing into the Hopkinton Public Schools. As is our tradition, when we start new educator orientation, we do a quick check of which first day of school as a profession it's going to be for the room. And Carol and I counted up that there were more than 300 years of experience coming into the Hopkinton Public Schools this year with our cast of new educators right there. A lot that we did, a quick shot you can see, there was some small group work, people getting their devices, logging in, learning how to use all those platforms, learning safety protocols, having lunch with the administrative team. You can see down the bottom right, there's Dr. Kavanaugh welcoming the group and giving a little bit of a preview of what HPS is all about, what we do, what we stand for, and what our priorities are. This year we really had a theme on equity and inclusion that ran throughout the entirety of our program. And exciting this year, 2 new things that we introduced this year. The first one was a new educator panel, and then which was exciting for us because what we did was we brought in, we invited our teachers that were new last year to come back and offer their wisdom on how they survived and thrived their first year in the Hopkinton Public Schools. So you can actually see that first shot on the left. 6 of our teachers who are entering their second year with us were able to share their wisdom with our incoming educators. We also added an additional day of the orientation program this year. It's traditionally been a 2-day program. We expanded it to 3 days because we wanted to be able to capitalize the momentum that really comes with the induction process and the excitement that comes with it. So you can see on the bottom right there, Shelley Moran, our Director of Elementary Mathematics, leading a group of our incoming elementary staff. That third day was really a dynamic day because while you had elementary folks working with like Shelley Moran or our Director of Elementary Literacy, our secondary people might have spent some time learning about restorative practices. Our newest school nurse was working in partnership with our nurse leader. So it was really a day that we got to maximize a great deal of skill amongst our leadership team and our teaching force, and really make sure that our incoming educators are armed and ready for the start. And by all accounts, it's been a really great start for all of them. So we're so excited that they are here, and we welcome them to Hopkinton.
Okay, so just a couple of photos from our opening days. I know that when Mrs. DeBow was here, she talked about our new school adjustment counselor who would be bringing in a therapy dog. So you get to see Toby, who is making quite a splash with our marathon students. To the right, you see our keynote speaker, Matthew Rodriguez, and I think he did a great job on opening day. We did something different this year. We usually have our keynote, and I will speak early in the morning, and then people will go back to their buildings. This year, we invited all the teachers into their buildings, and then they had lunch, and then they came out for a 2-hour presentation at the end of the day. And by all accounts, people loved that. They loved kind of coming home to their buildings and then coming out for something. So it was just accidental based on Matthew's availability, but I think we'll continue with that. Abby Hanscom in the lower left, she did something different this year as well. She took all of the special education department, brought them together in the high school auditorium, and just had a really nice, like maybe 35-minute kind of get-to-know-you thing with the team chairs, the related services providers, the special educators, the paraprofessionals. It was a great little meeting. And then you can see at the Elmwood School, we are already teaching and learning. So in the bottom center, we have a reading lesson, and on the right, we have a physical education class. Just quickly moving along, you'll remember that on opening day, it was a fine drizzle for the entire day. So the kids are coming into the middle school, but there were 3 educators there at the door greeting the kids who were coming in off the bus, and their greeting couldn't have been more friendly and welcoming. It was really lovely. Then we were at Hopkins, and they were coming in from the bus, and it was nice at Hopkins. They all wear the same shirt, do a nice welcome, but the kids they're drizzled on in that photo. And then, of course, there's the class of 24 living it up at the high school. This is one of their first lasts. This is their first last day, and so they were making the most of it. So our U.S. News and World Report ranking just came out, and it's based on several things. How many AP courses are people taking? How many tests are they taking? How many are getting passing grades? What is their math, their ELA, and their science proficiency? So all of those things are in there together. If you take all of the high schools in Massachusetts, and that encompasses charter schools, exam schools, all of them, Hopkinton High School was ranked 13th. If we look at just public high schools, so that you don't get to sort of choose your kids or test them in, we were ranked 7th, and I feel like that's a really nice ranking for us. So you can see that the 6 schools who were just slightly ahead of us. One thing I should add is when we talk about the people who are ahead of you, if Hopkinton High School's ranking was 97.25, for example, someone else there might only be 97.27 or 97.36. So, I mean, it's really a nice group of schools to be a part of. Just very quickly, some of the pictures of Marathon. I was over there the other day with Mrs. DeBow, and really, the floors are in, the walls are painted, the ceilings are in, the bathrooms are in. It's now just a matter of getting the furniture and some final touch-ups on the paint. The plan is to move in the weekend of September 23rd to 25th. And this picture here I put in there because Mr. Person was so thrilled to send it to us. I wasn't even sure what it was. But that crane is moving the HVAC unit onto the addition, so there it is.
And that's the HVAC for the entire building or just for the addition?
Just for the addition.
And it goes on the roof?
It does.
Interesting.
Where are those kids now? Like the kids moving into here, they doubled up in classes, or is it more
No,
spread
they're
out?
still in places like the art room.
Oh, the art.
I think some of them may be on the stage in the music room, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So when that opens, they will take all of that furniture and get those kids back
I
into.
bet they're happy to have
Apparently,
the
none of
spaces
them are on the
back.
roof.
You know,
They're on the roof. It was a hard day for them today. Those they must be so excited to have like their art spaces back and their
oh my
music
gosh,
spaces
yes,
back. That's awesome.
absolutely. You know, the art room when it was built, and this is a tangent, of course, but when the designers do these buildings, they actually sit with the art teachers and say, what do you need in that classroom? So they design that classroom specifically to be an art room.
Yeah.
So when you dismantle it, you're taking all of that furniture and even some wall fixtures and cabinetry out so that you can put the kids in.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that she and her staff will be happy to be back in that
I'm
space.
sure they will be.
Will that take a little bit of time to set up as an art room, or will that be an immediate?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's the person will
That's
know.
okay. That is exciting, because I remember when the building initially opened, how excited they were to have a designated art room and
Yeah.
Yes.
after many years of art on a cart at Center School. So.
The music space is very unique, so I would be
Yes.
like having those. It must be interesting as a classroom.
I think that would be a great place during lunch period, for example.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like this was originally slated for October, right? So isn't this early?
It is early.
That's
That's
wonderful.
amazing.
It's running under budget and
Congratulations.
early.
Congratulations, because it was hard to get to the point where we could start the project with funding and everything. So
You
This
should
was a
make-
dream project. It really went smoothly.
It really went
You
smooth.
should make flyers and hand that out like under budget
Yeah.
and early. Like
In a good track record of under budget and ahead of time.
I mean, yes, we did have to go back to the town to ask for additional funding, but that did come from the school stabilization, so it did not impact taxpayers. But the good news is we still came in under budget even though we anticipated additional costs.
So, under the budget, when you include the school stabilization fund on top of it, yep. So that some of that money will go back into or not leave the school stabilization fund.
Correct.
That's phenomenal on many fronts. So.
congratulations, that's great.
All right. I know this will make some people happy. It's a long, as Polnick would say, it's a long road to hoe. But we are trying to go paperless and get everybody in a place where they can submit their timesheets, paid time off, all of that electronically. We started with some central office people taking it for a little bit of a test drive, and there were a lot of hiccups along the way. But we are now working exclusively with the integrated preschool because they have some time on Wednesday mornings, so that if we need to troubleshoot, we can access them without having to pull them away from children, because children aren't there on Wednesday morning. So there's Mr. Ghosh doing his thing, and Dr. Ghosh doing his thing, and yeah, and it seems to be working.
Happy. I have just a quick one little question. So time cards will be able to be submitted with a device? Can it mobile too, or no?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
yep.
All the goodness is coming from that corner today.
When staff log in to their self-serve, there's actually even a QR code that they can scan with their phone, and then they'd have it on their phone, the site, so
was
yeah.
this
you can do it
previously
in any,
paper? All paper records?
excuse
Was
me?
this all previously paper records?
Yes,
That sounds terrible.
So instead of signing in, a teacher would just simply shoot the QR code with their phone?
so salaried, they don't actually put in their day, but they'll request if they are not in attendance. But hourly would actually put in their day,
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
that is all.
Questions? I did have one question just about because I think this confuses people in the community, because I know back in maybe February-ish, we were talking about the niche rankings, where the entire district was rated, and we came in at number 2 at that time. And
Yes, that's
that
right.
ranking is separate, and it's done on different criteria than the U.S. News and World Report rankings. But
Right.
my recollection is that's comparable to where we were last year. It's not a
Yes.
jump one way or the other.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I guess that moves us into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant S2402B, S24003, and S24004 have been approved. Warrants 24-003S, 24-004S, 24-005S, 24-006S, 24-007S, 24-008S, 24-009S, and 24-010S have all been approved and included in the packet. In terms of communication, I did receive, and I think everybody was copied on the 2 emails regarding the calendar, just with some concerns that people expressed over how long the school year goes, but also I think when we get to discussing the calendar, we can also kind of maybe give some history on the way that we had done the calendar subcommittees that have come up with the calendar that basically leads to where we are tonight. And then I also had a person who reached out to me who is interested in potentially running for the school committee in May. So that was exciting that people are starting to think about that. So that was it that I had for that. Does anybody have a liaison report? Okay.
So just to really report, the CPAC committee is having a coffee session tomorrow at the library, tomorrow morning. And also the HOP committee had a meeting today, but unfortunately I was not able to attend that meeting. So I will, as soon as I find out what the minutes were, I will follow up.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. All right, then that brings us back to you, Dr. Kavanaugh, with the Hopkins renovation project, and I think that was a timely.
It was very timely. Thank you, Nancy. So Jeff D'Amico, our owner's project manager, is here, and he's going to make a quick presentation to the committee. So thank you. We'll give you a second to
We're ahead of schedule by a little
settle in.
bit.
No, it's all right, no problem. Is the slideshow queued up or should I plug in? Or you guys have it in your packet or? I can plug in.
Perhaps we'll see Burning Man.
I put it up, or I don't know, you guys want to cast, or I can't cast?
Do you have it handy?
Did you emailed it to us?
Georgette, I think, emailed it to as part of the meeting packet to the committee, I believe. I've emailed it to you, too.
Do you want to just share it again, Jeff, and I'll put it up?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been a
I can
long,
sh-
hot day.
I can
We
share
have
it
to
from
sit
the
here
school
and
committee
comb it.
packet, Jeff.
Oh, all right.
Just
You want to
send it,
just put it
resend
up then, Susan?
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Apologize for the dead air. Not as bad as Burning Man with the mud out there, though. So, good evening. We're here to talk about the Hopkins School project. The question I have before the committee tonight is whether to choose a construction manager at risk delivery method, which is where we hire a partner in the process to be your advisor and ultimately manage the entirety of construction, or to choose a general contractor delivery method where it's the lump sum low bid price and you wait and get all the way to the completion of design and you award it to the lowest possible bidder. There's lots of pros and cons about those two delivery methods, which I'm going to talk to you about right now. But before I get to that, a little context on the project. And so the first slide here talks about that context. So where we are in the overall process, town meeting funded the design phase in May. We hired a designer in July. So we're about 7 weeks into the process of initiating the concept design of the overall project. Now that the users are back in school, and welcome back to school, everybody, we can really engage all the department heads to verify the contents of the renovation and the design itself. We're looking to wrap that up in what's known as a schematic design package in October, and then do our first estimate at the end of October. So that's kind of where we're developing it. Right now, the two main drivers on the program scope, as you see in the middle of the slide here, is with the addition itself, the enrollment is growing. And so we know that the gymnasium is undersized as well as the cafeteria and kitchen. And so with the larger population, we need to increase both of those. So with the renovation portion, one of those will remain in that area where either the CAF will get bigger into the gymnasium space or vice versa, and the other large entity will end up in the addition portion. From a standpoint of the design of the overall building, it's about the same size, so we're really looking to find the most cost-effective solution about whether it makes more sense to have the gymnasium adjacent to the fields or where the cost drivers are with all the plumbing and components of a kitchen and relocating that. And so that's what we'll be doing in October, really fine-tuning those costs and understanding which of the bigger elements ends up in the addition. But regardless of that, there's a lot of renovation in the existing building. And so, we want to go through and talk about that process tonight and identify some of the risks associated with that and why we think a construction manager is the best fit for this particular project. If you go to the next slide. So I wanted to break it down into what are we touching? All right, so this is a big picture standpoint. The blue on the left side of the image is the new addition. In this case, it shows the gymnasium shape, but essentially it would be the same, whether it's the gym or the CAF in that lower portion of the bar. The lower portion of the design here is the first floor, and the top part of the graphic is the second floor. So you'll see that the lower floor, the addition has either the gym or the CAF, and then on the second floor, it's just a couple of classrooms on the addition piece here. So that's why there's a gap between those two. What's dark blue is the heavy renovation. So that's where the gymnasium and the cafeteria and the stage exist today and music. And so that would be the most invasive portion of the renovation. There's a few other areas located around the library and a few other spaces that are highlighted in purple. Also, where we connect to the new addition would have new hallways extended through what are existing classrooms. So those couple of classrooms also will have a heavier level of renovation. That's all depicted in the purple. And that essentially is the core of the project that we're rolling forward with. With that, there's other things that we will explore with the school department about what can we afford within the scope of the overall project, and we've broken that down to kind of medium, light, and extra light levels of renovation. So an extra light in light yellow is essentially we're not doing much beyond just patch and paint. We'll go through those rooms, or maybe some touch-up. A light renovation may be replacing the ceiling tiles that need to be replaced as part of this project versus being a deferred maintenance element. And then medium, we start to get into spaces where there are other modifications that are there. Because of the size of the overall addition, we will trigger code upgrades. Even though it seems like a new building, it's from the 90s, there have been upgrades and changes to codes, especially the accessibility and things like that. So we may need to go change door pulls, change height of railings and stairwells. And so that's where you get into that kind of medium grade change in the hallway location, some of those handrails and levers to doors. So before we talk about which method to delve down, I just wanted that context out there. Any question on the context of where we are in the process and the kind of levels of renovation that we're considering? Okay.
No, just for Dr. Kavanaugh, is the 6th grade included in the conversation as you're, okay.
They are. Mr. LaFave comes to all of these working group meetings, and we have meetings set up where the educators from the middle school will be part of this sort of fine-tuning design process when we talk about what you really need in your physical space in your classroom.
So that's already initiated with both principals. They attend our regular meetings, and with school back in session, we have a bunch of meetings scheduled, trying to fit it into the busy start of school too, to collect all that information. So the next slide is really just about the process, and you can skip to the next one after that. So really this dates back, I'll spare you the history. It used to only be the option for building a building was to fully design it and put it out there to the lowest responsible bidder. In the 70s, they started to change that and looking for a partner in the process, really to bring the value add versus the lowest common denominator that is able to build your building. Next slide is, so a general contractor is the lowest possible price to perform the work. So that's if your designer forgot to draw it, or didn't put enough information, that contractor come back to you for an extra. When you hire a construction manager, they have an allowance set aside to deal with these unforeseen conditions and helps mitigate that so you're not constantly going back to the well for change orders. Next slide. So the real difference is when you have a construction manager, you're hiring a partner. Really, they have a seat at the table. They're working with the users to define the phasing. With a general contractor, you're purchasing a building in accordance with whatever the plans and drawings that you actually assembled, and all we own is what we drew and what they bid on. With a construction manager, we have something called implied intent. So if we were close enough with the information, then we were able to fill those gaps with that allowance, and it's able to keep the project moving at a quick pace versus breaking down and having to renegotiate change orders. Next slide. So I'll spend a little bit more time on this slide and the next slide. So that kind of breaks down what the differences are between these two categories. A CM at risk is a qualifications-based selection process. So we will solicit proposals. It's a two-part process where those firms submit a qualifications. We will shortlist those firms. We could get 10 proposals at that point. We can whittle it down to 3 to 4. We go back out again. We give them more specifics of the project. They come back with a tailored price that reflects their cost, so their staffing, what they want to carry for the allowances, and the overall insurances that they will ultimately charge you. So that ends up being, roughly 10% of the project you kind of lock in at that juncture. And there's an ability to negotiate some of that at that stage, but you're picking the individual people that'll be boots on the ground, as well as the staff itself that will lead your project. With a general contractor, it's the lowest cost. So whoever firm submits that, they have the lowest price. You get whatever team they assign to you, and that's who we have to work with. So with a construction manager, you tend to have a higher level of expertise and technical support. You also have a much broader pool of firms that are interested. With a general contractor, you may have 5 firms, bid on a project of this size, where I said you may get 10 to 12 interested in a construction management process. The other points to note here are that the CM gives more flexibility. It allows us to break the project down into earlier packages. So you're able to procure certain elements such as mechanical equipment that may have a long lead time, as we experienced over the last couple of years during COVID. You can procure that early. You can also procure your steel early or your site work early, as opposed to waiting for the entirety of the design to be completed all at once, which is where you would proceed under a general contractor. So you're able to accelerate the schedule with CM at risk over the general contractor. They also have a longer tail in post-construction because they're pride themselves on their references, how they get the next job. They tend to be more invested on the back end as well. Last point I want to make on the right side is the owner has little to no say in the subcontractors of a general contractor delivery method. So that means we get whoever they assign to us. It may be a fly-by-night subcontractor because they're also trying to get the lowest price from their subs. And we have had instances where those subcontractors go out of business because they've really squeezed them down, and that becomes a challenge to deliver the overall project. Bottom line is that some projects are sufficiently simple that going design bid build makes sense. The Elmwood is an actual perfect example of that. That project is a standalone building in a field that does not require interacting and engaging with the existing occupants of the building. There's no demo and abatement phase. The level of risks are significantly reduced on a project like that. And it's also of a certain size that will weed out a lot of the lower quality contractors. When you get to that $100+ million project range, you end up with a higher pool of general contractors. When you're in the $40 million range, is a much wider pool, and the quality can be more up and down with general contractors. Construction manager, this is from the Inspector General's report when they evaluated it, that CM projects are most appropriately for large, complex projects involving phases, complex logistics, occupied campuses, aggressive schedules. Simple projects are most appropriate for relatively basic, new, clean projects, again, like the Elmwood project. But your project, because you're getting into those individual spaces, you can't fit it all in a summer. We're envisioning working over 2 summers, but there's just too much scope with that heavy and medium renovation to fit within that confines. So last 2 manager, you're picking your team, you're getting a higher level of technical expertise, occupied reno, and we can work hand in hand with them as unforeseen conditions arise, and they will as you open those, as opposed to a general contractor that will have their hand out. Easily accommodate the schedule changes. As I noted, the early bid packages for site and foundation, and then the access of contingency allows them to work more collaboratively and manage the overall number and keep the overall number. So a construction manager prices the project with a guaranteed maximum price. So that means they take all the numbers from the subcontractors, similar to a general contractor, but then they pack in a few allowances, holds, and contingencies based on what they believe is necessary to fill any gaps. And that's the overall number that we set for the contract. A general contractor comes in low, and then as changes happen, they keep asking for more money, and so you get up to a higher level towards the end of the project where they start to get closer on an overall standpoint. The last point here is we're recommending construction manager, and then the final slide shows you the overall schedule. And so if you want to just go 2 forward, Susan, 1 more. Where we are in the overall process, and the other reason we're recommending CM is that right now we're in Q3 of 2023. We've started schematic design. We're then going to roll into design development, and then we'll start permitting and final design at the beginning of the year. We know that you typically only have 1 annual town meeting. I know in the case of Elmwood, you are calling a special town meeting, but that's not typical. If you were to go with a general contractor method, you would either have to appropriate the money on the estimate ahead of time or schedule a special town meeting. In the case with the construction manager, we can go with a more defined estimate because they're a partner in the process. They have more skin in the game, and they will put a more tight number together. And that's what we're proposing to go to the annual town meeting in with, essentially what is a 60% construction document estimate. So most of the way there, and that's a full estimate from the construction manager, as well as we'll have an independent estimate from the designer as well. In the bottom blue bars, you'll see that we hire the construction manager during that construction documents phase and permitting, so they're involved. They're hearing what the permitting is putting on the project. They're following through with that. They're also influencing the design. They're correcting things along the way with the design team. There may be a better way to do it that's more cost effective. We're taking that knowledge and passing it on to the design team, and that can get implemented into the ultimate design documents. I show a range on the construction cost because until we hire them, we don't know the amount of sub-phases that'll be needed for that backfill and renovation. So we may be able to deliver this project in less than 2 years, or it may be 2.5 years. And that's really where they provide a lot of that value. And they can explain, we can do it more efficiently if you turn over these rooms at this time. And then we will engage the users and say, is it eligible? Where are we with the enrollment growth? Do we have these couple of rooms available, swing space, which will allow us to then really fine tune the overall schedule. And then we're looking to, complete it sometime in December of 2026, but potentially in the fall of 2026, depending on the overall duration of that construction schedule. So I know I threw a lot at you. Happy to answer any questions and talk further about either of these delivery methods.
Thank you. Both questions?
I did have a question. Holly, were you gonna ask?
No.
Okay, sorry, I thought you. On one of the slides, I think I forget which slide now, that a construction manager tends to be a certain percentage over up front.
Yep.
But then, could you just kind of review again what you said about the cost? You
Yep.
might pay more up front, but you may end up coming in similar in the end, or?
Yep, excellent point. So the price premium noted at the bottom left here in the corner said construction manager can be 5 to 6% over the cost of a design bid build. And some of that relates to building all those allowances early on and putting the money within the project. Now those allowances and the contingencies that are in the overall guaranteed maximum price, if you don't use it, it all gets turned back to the owner. So you start with a higher number, and as you go through the project and as risk starts to fall off, as you get further into the renovations, you know whether you're gonna need these elements or not. Some of that money then can get turned back to the overall project, and we either could reinvest it or turn it back to the taxpayers if it's not necessary overall as part of the project. With the construction manager, with the general contractor, you go into low bid, right? So we would appropriate a certain amount of money, they would come in with a low bid, and as change orders add up over the course of the project, that then starts to bring them up closer to the overall construction project. On a larger project, such as an Elmwood example, the difference stays as a much greater rate because you're not going to make up on a percentage basis as much. On a smaller renovation of an occupied building, that general contractor is going to find ways to say he didn't own that, it was not documented, and therefore his change orders are at a higher rate. So with a general contractor versus a CM on an interior renovation like this, they will start to equalize towards the end. CM, there's still a premium, but you're also paying for more staff. As an example, a typical construction manager would have a project manager, an assistant project manager, a superintendent, and an assistant superintendent. A general contractor would just have a project manager and an assistant. So you're paying for 4 people versus 2. But the 4 people are doing more jobs related to managing the phasing, managing the users, managing expectations, delivering quality, keeping on top of the quality, so that when you turn the building over, there's less issues, versus the contractor on the general side is really trying to deliver it by the end date for the price, and they will deliver it. And I'm not trying to disparage general contractors. We, of course, work with them all the time. We're willing to do it. On Elmwood, it makes sense on certain projects. But the risk is greater with an occupied renovation, and so we really believe, as does Perkins, that the benefits outweigh the risks here, and that the committee should proceed with construction manager at risk on this project.
And I think if I heard correctly, one of the things that going with a CM versus a GM is that with the GM, there's the potential of getting into the project and then something unforeseen happens, so that could create additional delays and additional funding requests, whereas with the CM, that's all kind of built in on the front end.
Yeah, there's always risk with both, so I want to be clear that there is a certain level of risk if we can't exceed the budget in either cases. That comes down to the amount of contingency. So outside of whatever the construction bid is on the start date, we will always carry a certain contingency. On a new build project, it would be a low contingency, like 5%. On a renovation project, it would range from 8 to 10% because the risks are greater. And so, with a general contractor, we would err on the 10% side because we need to access that money at the time that it's needed. If we have a construction manager, we can edge that down because some of that is already baked into their overall number. So there are differences related to that. Ultimately, there's methods in both avenues to keep the project moving. With a general contractor, we would issue a change directive, it's called a CCD, which is, we understand this cost, we're not agreeing on it, you have to proceed with the cost, and we are going to negotiate it after the fact. And so there are elements within your contract that allow us to do that. That's an industry standard, but it's more adversarial because I know you're not happy and you don't believe we're going to agree on the number, but you have to proceed based on your contract. And so it's more adversarial, but there are methods that we can keep the job moving with both cases.
Am I correct in my recollection that the original Marathon project was a CM at risk?
That's correct.
That's right.
Go ahead. Just given that this is going to be, if all is approved, this would be going on in parallel with the Elmwood build, and it's occupied, and as you said, we're opening up a building which may require upgrade. We don't really know exactly what we're going to get into. I think your logic makes sense. I'm just wondering, Ms. Roderick, if you have an opinion from your seat, are you in agreement with the CM approach?
I am, and, you know, we talked about this when Jeff shows you all the touch points. I mean, that's a big deal. When you think about all the additions that we've done so far, you know, adding on the modular classrooms, doing the addition to the high school, doing the addition to Marathon, we were not intrusive to the rest of the building. This is intrusive, and so that is a big difference.
Would this also include adding modulars on? Or not? No, that would be
So-
later.
I'll let Jeff speak
Yeah,
to.
so remains to be seen. You know, we're exploring that option. Right now, there's some floor-to-floor differences on the second floor, so we're trying to solve that, you know, without having a large ramp down, because the floor-to-floor at Elmwood and Hopkins are different. So we are in talks with the manufacturer about, you know, can we modify it? If not, you know, what are the pitches that we need to do with the ramping? So that's an element that we're still investigating multiple options for.
Okay, other questions? Okay.
Now, the other piece to keep in mind, and I know this came up at the select board meeting as well, is other uses for the Elmwood building, should the Elmwood project pass. So part of what the permanent building committee's scope, I believe, is how would they use the existing Elmwood building, which right now includes the modulars. They may propose that they stay if this becomes a complicated transition, you know, to work. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that.
Okay, that's a good point. The other piece that jumps out at me is that the Hopkins lower middle school schedule on there, just as a reminder, I think, for folks at home, that we need this addition, whether we change our grade configuration through the Elmwood project or it stays a 4-5 school, that we still are going to need to do this addition. So it's not,
That's correct.
it does not negate the need for this addition.
Yes, we always use the numbers, whether it's a 4 or 5 school or 5-6 school.
one
It's
student.
802 or 803 kids.
The
so.
population is there, will be there.
Yes.
For sure.
So, all right. Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there somebody who feels like they would like to make a motion?
Can I ask about the motion?
You sure can.
I know we need to decide which route we want to go. Do we also have to empower somebody to make that selection, or is that implied? Like, do we have to, like, vote to give somebody the authority? I don't know if it's you.
I know what you're saying. Is
Are there 2 votes, or is it 1 vote, or
How to choose who
who would it
do
be?
it.
to make the selection?
Yeah, so we could do, great question. So to explain the process, with public construction in Massachusetts, we have to apply to the Inspector General's office to be allowed to use the alternate delivery method, because construction manager is considered the alternate method from the lump sum low bid. So what this vote tonight does is it establishes our ability to go submit that application. It's a 3-part process where we submit the application, they give us the green light. Then we go through the 2-step stage that I talked about, where we go for a qualifications-based process, and then the actual RFP that has a price proposal. For those 2 steps, we usually have a selection committee, which is comprised of at least 1 member of the OPM, 1 member of the design team, and 2 members of the ownership. So we could establish that tonight as well, if you would like. But the real vote that we need is to start the Inspector General process.
So would it be okay to wait on that vote to give us more time to kind of be prepared for that? To just do the vote that's about the process that we're going to use, and then
Yep.
take the second vote at a later date? Okay.
That's good. That's perfect.
All right. Then is there somebody that would like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion that may move forward with the process of going to the IG to get approval for the remainder of the process.
The construction,
Is that worded?
pursue
Do
a
you wanna
construction
read it
manager
as-
at risk.
Yes.
I'm going to read it from, I don't know if we need the specific wording in there or not.
Mostly just the word just needs to say that you're recommending that we pursue construction manager at risk, and that you're authorizing us to file on your behalf.
Okay, so I make the recommendation that we use the construction manager at risk delivery method for the Hopkins School renovation project.
Excellent. So a motion by Adam, is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Great. Thank you very much. It's a unanimous vote, so we can go forward with the AG and hope to come back to this soon with the next steps.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you for all your work in Hopkinton right now. I know it's, we're keeping you busy.
Plenty of it.
I spent a lot of time in that seat right there.
Becoming fond of it.
Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good night. That brings us into our next agenda item, which is the 2024 to 2025 school year calendar. Dr. Kavanaugh, please.
Sure. So I'm sure that you had a few moments to take a look at this as it exists in your packet. We still have in there, some of the added holidays that the last calendar committee put forth. This is the first year, I believe, that we will have Lunar New Year off, which is a no school day in January this year on the 29th. We also still have November 5th off for professional development. I think it balances out, and I think I remember this from our calendar work, that the putting in Lunar New Year balances out because Eid al-Fitr is not in there. This year it falls on a weekend. So the last day of school, as you see it here, would be the 18th, I'm sorry. And then, of course, if Juneteenth, if we have a snow day, then we would have Juneteenth off, and that date would move to Friday. So there's really only wiggle room for one snow day before you would move to the next week, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm not explaining that well.
I am just looking through, I did look through it before, but I got confused on when we're jumping and talking about 2025.
Oh, that's right, yes.
So just to back up with the process, my recollection is that we voted on these specific holidays as part of the calendar subcommittee, that we voted, brought a recommendation to the school committee. We voted sometime early to mid 2022. It was before the election, I think. And that was it had been the follow-up on a previous iteration from a year or two before that, where we had said we'd come back to it.
Yes.
We left it in 2022. My recollection is that we were not going to review it, do a big calendar subcommittee for a few years, that we were going to, is that, you were on the
Right,
subcommittee.
I'm just trying to, was it 2022? I feel
That's
like
when we voted.
Was it, it wasn't
It was,
2022? Because
yeah.
I feel like, I thought we had 2 years with the calendar, but I guess we only had one so far.
This past year was the first,
First full
2022
year.
to 2023 was the first full year.
The one we're looking
And
at
not
will be
all
the
of them.
third.
Right, because we're in
Yes.
the second one right now. This will be the third.
And yes, we were not going to change it immediately.
Immediately, we're going to live with
bit.
it for a couple of
Yeah,
years.
Exactly.
The other question that I recall from an email had to do with the Friday before Labor Day, which I believe is a contractual day off
It is a
in the
contractual day off,
teacher
yes.
contract, so that is not something we're able to pull out.
I think there was another comment on one of the emails about, like, could we shorten the winter holiday, or we also have February and April off? And I will say, it feels like a long, long time ago, but when we were on the calendar subcommittee, we talked about all these things because wondering what we could do, and part of the constraint in what, in terms of like the February, April, and winter breaks is that we employ a lot of residents of neighboring towns, and so our teachers have kids, and like sort of staying in sync generally in terms of the big holidays was a factor. There's sort of a trickle-down effect if we, say, had just a March holiday instead of February and April, or things like that. So that was something that we talked about. And obviously, maybe not obviously, but one of the main drivers in the holidays that we have is looking at the demographics of the community and discussing what it means to be in school on holidays that are important to your culture, whether it's Diwali or Christmas or, whatever, whichever, any of these days, Lunar New Year, what does that look like? What do the students experience? There were students on the committee, as well as teachers and admin and community members. So it was a balance of inclusivity and making sure that everybody had equal access to learning on as many days as possible without some of these distractions. But also going in with a lot of requests to just make it more consistent for working families, which is admittedly a challenge when we have days off and early release. We talked about, can we do more early releases? Can we do shorter days? And early releases don't really provide the same learning opportunity, as I understood it from our conversations, as a full day. It counts as a day, but it doesn't really count like in the same way. You don't get the same, especially in the high school, where all of your periods just get shortened, I think. So you have very, very rapid fire classes and you can't really get into the material. So peppering with early release days was talked about, but not really effective for learning. So we ended up in a place that was, for this 3-year phase or so, that was inclusive, representative of the changing demographics in our town, and trying to optimize learning and access to learning and equity for the kids.
Yes.
Did I capture our
Beautifully,
conversations?
yes.
Okay.
I think one of the things we were most proud of, so you can go on the DESE website and you can find out all kinds of demographics, but very few school districts have cultural or religious data on their community. And I feel like we harvested that data, and it allowed us to kind of see what were the more important holidays. And we know that historically, the school calendar is built on a Christian calendar. You know, you always have Christmas off, you always have Easter off. We always give our people Good Friday off. So, just to be sensitive to the other folks in town who, for whom there are other really important holidays. I will just kind of dovetail on what you said about the kids. The kids said to us, even if you tell us that you're not going to give a test or a quiz on that day, we're actually outside of school trying to observe our holiday. But it's really hard because in the backs of our minds, we know that teaching and learning are happening in that school, and we are missing it. And it creates a distraction, if not some angst for us.
So I want to say one more thing about the survey, because we did do a survey to feed the committee, and we did get a lot of responses. The response rate overall was very low. But among the responses that we got, we did get a number of people who really wanted no additional help, like just sort of strip it down to just like the federal and state holidays. And the committee is a committee whose job is to make a recommendation, and with lots of debate and chewing on the sample size that we got, which again wasn't statistically significant. It was a small sample size, and we did hear it. We talked a lot. We debated a lot. The committee recommended the calendar you have, and then the school committee voted to adopt it. The subcommittee just made the recommendation, but it was the school committee that adopted it. So just to kind of review the process, and to say that there was a survey, and there were lots of other voices that are not reflected in the ultimate result.
I recall as a school committee member, it was running concurrently with other difficult conversations. So
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so I think I was kind of impressed with how thoughtfully and thoroughly these were discussed, because, it's a difficult, everybody thinks their idea is the best one, right? So, was there ever a plan to convene a future committee? Does this committee convene every 3 years, or is it just kind of as necessary, or?
I can recall a couple of different iterations. So that actually is what kind of brought me into the school committees. I was a community member on a calendar subcommittee in 2015.
Okay.
It was very emotional
Yeah.
in terms of people that were
Yeah.
concerned about losing holidays that were already on there, people wanting to change other pieces of it. And we didn't add any holidays in at that time, but we kept
What you have.
what we had. We kept Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Good Friday, I think, were the three that had been discussed at that time. And then there was another discussion of the calendar when
Year
you're
2018.
Yeah.
So there, yeah.
and then we came back to it then in 21, 22. So it does seem like that's about every 3 years. That's a long way of me mentally doing the math.
Kind of magically, though, not intentionally.
But it's the school committee's purview to spin this up, right? You know, if we think that
Yeah.
we need to look at it again, I
Right.
think it's,
Yeah.
just because we don't have a plan, doesn't mean it won't happen. Which is kind of how it's happened.
I will say that I have had conversations with people in the community who would not have had some of these holidays, either Diwali or Eid, off in prior calendars, and how meaningful that has been to some of those people. And that, to me, was powerful as a school committee member to hear, you know, how much that means to their family. I did have sort of a different question on that as well. I see that we have the 23rd off of December.
Oh, that's because Christmas is on a Wednesday.
Because okay, I did.
When Christmas falls on a Wednesday, we typically have an 11-day break.
And is that, because that is a longer break, is that because the attendance is low for people traveling that week, or what is the?
Attendance would be low, and probably the best that you would do is sort of open the school on Monday, the 23rd.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
basically,
Yeah.
like, if you're teaching, you're only gonna have class one day that week, and then you have,
Yes,
they're not present.
correct.
I mean, they physically, but not mentally.
I would
Because
guess
we have the
kids are higher.
24th off, so you'd be opening the building for just that one day.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're
Although,
right,
I
they're
mean,
not there.
The flip side of that is that is one day that prevents us from going into that week of the 23rd.
Right.
One day more that I haven't thought that through entirely. I
Sure.
just sort of,
It also, depending on what the weather would be like, heating the building for one day and then shutting it down, I mean,
versus potentially 90-degree days, though.
this is true, this is true.
It can go both ways.
We could be skiing, water skiing.
I think you make a really good point about that. I mean, because if we slip the 18th, then we're looking at the 24th,
Right.
which is a big difference.
Right now, there's sort of room for one snow day
Right.
before you go to the next week.
Yeah, okay.
And as strange as it seems, when you get out of school, say, on the 18th, as opposed to the 23rd, the distance from when you get out of school to the 4th of July is something that you kind of keep in your head as an educator.
Oh, yeah,
Makes
once
a
the
big
4th of
difference.
July's over, summer's over.
And there was one year that I can recall where we went, we had so many we had 6 snow days, which put us into the following week, which would have put us on into July 1. And the school committee, which I was not on at the time, had to go back and make adjustments because of it impacted the teacher contract. And nobody wants to go to school in July. So I mean, we are early in this process, which is really good. I don't know if people want to give it more thought before we take a vote, or if people feel ready to vote on it.
I'd like to see it tabled and then brought back at our next meeting, perhaps.
I think that's how I was feeling as well.
Me too.
And I know that we have talked about the hardship for our educators. The 23rd might prove to be one if we
Okay,
are one
yep.
of the few districts that hold school on that day, and their children are all at home. So I'm not advocating either way.
No, but that would be important feedback, I think,
Sure.
to have how they feel.
Yes.
Could we get maybe just a couple benchmarks for what other districts are doing on that day? Or thinking they're going to be doing, because they're probably also voting like we are?
If they have the calendars published now, we can certainly do that.
That might be helpful for when we vote.
The other thing that I think is different from one district to another is some districts are open on December 24th.
That's true.
And so that would be a different, can you imagine being a teacher?
I once had to work Christmas Eve.
When my oldest kids were small, we used to have an early release day in Hopkinton on Christmas Eve. And, obviously we've had changes in who we have in our schools and in the demographics and whatnot, and how people feel is different from now than it may have been then, but.
It's another day when, if you have an early release, the students aren't mentally present.
All right, so let's table the calendar discussion and put that because I do like to get it out early for working families to be able to mark their dates. And then move into the Fresh Food Award. Ms. Rotherman.
Thank you. So our food service director wrote a grant and was able to secure $20,181 for the schools, and this is for the Northeast Food for Schools grant. And basically what this does is it allows to really source local foods, local meat, local fish, local produce, because it is more costly, but it really supports that farm to table initiative within our cafeterias.
That's fabulous. Questions, comments?
I had a question about our school menu. That was, this kind of addresses the question kind of perfectly, so I'm happy to bring it back to the parent. I directed her to the food services director, so I was like, I don't know anything about how we make our menus, but I think she'll be happy to see this, so thank you.
That's great.
Does it make her job more difficult having to then manage local sourcing?
It's not easy.
I was going to say, it's challenging.
It's challenging.
And she
4,200
is up for it, clearly. I mean, kudos to her for writing this grant.
Yeah, it's still a challenge because you have to contact the local farms, see what they have available weekly. So, yeah, it's a challenge.
But okay.
It's manageable.
I'm thinking we have so many mouths to feed and so many lunches to run, and it's a lot. I'm thrilled if she's thrilled.
Yeah,
that
I mean, any additional funding that we can get for initiatives such as this is always welcome.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Is there somebody who feels moved to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to accept the grant from Northeast Food for Schools, grant awarded, provided. I feel like that sounded weird. Did it make sense?
Made sense to me.
Makes sense.
All right.
I don't know, I think you need to list the dollar amount in
Oh,
advance.
okay. Oh, I just skipped the whole, in the amount of $20,181 for Hopkinton Public Schools.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
perfect. Motion by Holly. Is there a second on the motion? Okay, second by Adam. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's great. And thank you to our food services director for applying for that, even though it creates more work. All right, so that moves us down into the special education staff requests. Dr.
Okay.
Kavanaugh.
Thank you. So the first one is for a 0.5 FTE increase in a special education intensive special needs teacher at the Elmwood School. What happened in May is that we had a 0.5 intensive special educator who resigned. And in May, we posted the position, and by July, we had 8 applicants. And we interviewed those who were qualified, and none of them ended up taking the job because it was a 0.5 position. So then we reposted in July, and we kept that posting up through August, and, again, we had no applicants at all this time. So when David Broninger came in as the building principal, he and Beth Callahan, who's the K-5 director, reached out to the original 8 and said, is there any chance you'd reconsider? And none of them wanted to. So Mrs. Hanscom, our director of student services, then decided that she would look to contract through an agency. And still, we were unable to find an applicant for a 0.5 intensive special needs teacher. So what's happening right now is we do have one special intensive teacher in that building. And, today, again, I was in that classroom and it was very warm in there. It's very challenging for the kids. But she currently has 15 students then on her caseload because we used to have 1.5. And caseloads for our intensive teachers are somewhere around 10. They can go to 12, they can go to 9, but we like to keep them somewhere around 10. It seems like a reasonable number. And so she's got 15, but what we're doing is we're pushing in with people who can help support her. So ABA techs are in the room, lots of paraprofessionals in the room, but she is very much looking forward to having some relief. So we also looked at the numbers of students who are currently at Marathon and who will be leaving Elmwood. So there are 3 intensive students at Elmwood who are our 3rd graders who will be going on to the 4th grade. So of those 15, 12 will remain, but there are 9 intensive students in grade 1 who will be moving to Elmwood next year. So that will take the number to 21 in the FY25 budget season. And so we posted as an anticipated position, pending whether or not, this vote went through tonight. And we currently have 4 people who have submitted applications and resumes to us, and they are all people who are qualified for the position. So our belief is that, a year from now, we're going to have 2 people in there. It's a 0.5 ask, but it's going to maintain the staffing that we have now, because she can't stay in that role with 15 students on her caseload for the entire year. And I think that it's just generally good for kids. So the caseload numbers will go to 8 and 7, as opposed to 15 for one person for this year, and then it will go to 11 and 10 in the following year.
Will that then free up some of the paraprofessionals to do other things that they were doing prior to this?
If it is a person
caseload?
that we pushed into the room,
Yep,
it will free them
That's,
up.
okay, that's great.
And will you be offering this job to somebody with the kind of codicil that next year it'll be full-time?
It will be full-time now, because there already is a 0.5.
Okay, you're gonna go to full-time now.
We're asking you to add a 0.5 position to
Okay.
make it whole.
Okay.
And a beautiful thing that I did see in the packet is that we're able to fund the increase out of the preschool revolving fund, so it's not an ask from the taxpayers.
Yes.
This year.
And next year it'll go in the budget.
I believe it's an increase to the preschool that we can sustain, and it's probably where we would have gone with the FY25 budget anyway.
Okay.
Okay, that's great.
And I know we've been dipping into our revolving funds increasingly to alleviate pressure on the budget. Are we comfortable with this?
Yes, this is an avenue that, like I said, I would have recommended for the FY25 budget anyway.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Okay. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion to approve the increase in the 0.5 special ed position to full-time 1.0 FTEs in the severe intensive program?
I move to increase the 0.5 special ed position to a full-time FTE for severe and intensive position.
Great, so motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Second by Adam. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstain?
Thank you. I'm sure our teacher is at home watching, and I'm sure she will be thrilled.
Thank you for our teacher who is covering an extra
Yeah.
heavy
Yes.
caseload.
That's a
because
lift.
We couldn't hire.
That is a win for the students and a win for
It is.
the staff. So, all right, so then there's more.
Yes, so although these appear as 2 agenda items, they are really the same request. And this request only comes to you because we've had students move into the district who require what we call a C paraprofessional or ABA tech. So we are looking for 1 at the Elmwood School and then 1 at the Hopkins School.
And I know, if I recall correctly, that we have had trouble filling some paraprofessional positions in the past. Is that, did I make that up? I feel like we had a bunch of openings last year.
No, we still actually have paraprofessional positions open right now.
Do we feel confident that are the C paraprofessionals easier to attract? I mean, in terms of, I guess,
I don't know how many people are easy to attract right now in those kinds of positions. But these are the paraprofessionals who make the most money, and they do have a very specialized skill set, so.
okay. All right, so I guess we should take them separate motions for the two.
think so.
Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion on the special ed C paraprofessional for Elmwood?
I move that we approve the special ed C paraprofessional for Elmwood.
Okay. Motion by Susan, is there a second?
Second?
Second by Adam, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay, and then we can go to the vote for the special education C paraprofessional for Hopkins.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special education C paraprofessional for Hopkins.
Okay, motion by Adam, is there a second by Susan?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? All right, thank you very much for bringing those requests forward.
Thank you.
Appreciate that we're able to move on that quickly relative in the school year. All right, so that moves us into the next item on the agenda, which is the district improvement plan. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay. I'm not sure if I have the right district improvement plan up there. I think I do.
It is in the packet for those who want to follow along from home.
I hope this is the correct one, although it says 22, 23, and 22, 24, so. I want to look to see if that's the right one. Okay. We might need a moment to make sure that.
The one in the packet says 23, 24.
I thought so. Okay, so that's the right one then.
So 22, 23.
There it is. Okay. I'll get back on the screen. Okay. All right, so just a little bit of history for those of you who are new to the committee. Every school district in Massachusetts has to have a school district improvement plan. And when I first came on board, naturally you go through that whole process of doing the listening tour and you write your entry plan. But at that time, we also hired a consultant, and DESE has consultants that they can send into your district. Obviously, you pay for them. But that person did a really nice job of, kind of helping us workshop and brought a nice objective pair of eyes to the process. And so what we put together, I think, in that first year is something that for a couple of years we just massaged. When I came on board, the mission statement of the Hopkinton Public Schools was very simply learn, create, achieve together. And so it wasn't this past summer in 2023, but it was the summer before in 2022 that the admin council, so at the time there were probably 25 or 26 of us, really sat down and kind of peeled away the onion, so to speak, like what was really in this plan. And our consultant had helped us with some of those big buckets. We could start to see that enrollment growth was going to be an issue. And, we knew that we were sort of changing culturally and demographically. So those kinds of things were sort of easy to come up with. But I'll start with the vision that the district administrative team wrote last summer. And, this was obviously approved by the school committee, but I think it's important to take a look at it again. So the vision for the Hopkinton Public School District is that we aspire to be a community of educational innovation where children are challenged and inspired to reach their fullest potential, afforded the agency to define who they will become, and celebrated for their human kindness. And I think we worked on that for a long time and wordsmithed, and it was really important for us to not dictate that there is just one pathway or a more valued pathway in Hopkinton. But when we talk about kids defining who they could become, I think that that's really important for us. And I think that, we call it a vision because I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I do think that we have a very typical vision of where kids go, and some kids don't go there. So I think when we get to a place where kids can truly feel comfortable in their own skin being who they are, I think we'll get closer to that place. So our mission statement, the Hopkinton Public Schools ensures equitable access for all students to academically challenging curricula in a community that supports social emotional learning, ultimately guiding young adults to create their own pathways, engage in citizenship, and foster respect for self and others. So the buckets that we fill are planning for our enrollment growth, meeting every student's needs, and building a community of respect and collaboration. And so you can sort of see that those are also reflected in the vision and the mission, and we know that enrollment is a thing, building a community of respect and collaboration, and then making sure that we're addressing our kids and their individual needs and their wants and who they wish to become. So we have our plan for enrollment growth with plans of reaching over 5,000 students by the year 2030-31. The Hopkinton Public Schools continue to focus on growing our physical plants and extracurricular spaces, with a likely result being grade configuration changes. Responsibly, our construction projects are focused on accommodating future growth as well as ensuring the environmental health of our community. Accordingly, the schools must use budgeted resources wisely to provide the highest quality, innovative education for all students, flexing programs to ensure equity and access as student profiles demand. Fortunately, beyond our campuses lies a community of invested stakeholders. And we've had that language for a couple of years. We continue to tweak it as, we evolve from one year to the next. In terms of meeting every student's needs, the Hopkinton Public Schools see each child as an individual learner and human being. It's imperative to note that Hopkinton's student profiles are diversifying, resulting in broader student needs. Academically, we center first on learning foundational skills within a community, gradually introducing more diverse pathways as students mature and near graduation. We pledge an investment in students' social, emotional, behavioral, and physical wellness, and we commit to growing programs that help all students access challenging curricula with the hope to graduate well-balanced young adults who take risks, think independently, and believe in themselves and persevere. And then finally, building a community of respect and collaboration. While it might be easy to focus on academic successes alone, the Hopkinton Public Schools believes in helping children develop a capacity for kindness, respect, compassion, and service to others. We believe in collaborative learning and fostering the growth of relational competencies. Students must understand how others live and build relationships across race, class, gender, and learning abilities to create caring learning communities. Every member of our community is expected to model these behaviors. We engage in this work believing that the ends are best met when we also have strong relationships between families and schools. So those were our three big buckets. It's all the language that we've worked on for a couple of years. And I think that it really guides the school improvement plans, which you'll see on the 21st in 2 weeks. And I think it guides my work in terms of my goals and indicators. All right, and then people perhaps wonder how we come up with these bullets. One of the things that we ask of all of the school buildings and all of the directors, so whether you're the social emotional learning director or the middle school ELA director, or you are the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction or the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, you look at those buckets and you say, how does my work contribute to that growth? And so that's really what you're seeing when you take a look at the bulleted items underneath each one of those headings. And some of them are sort of very easy to explain to you. So for example, if you looked at the last bullet on that page, to revise the grade 2 to 4 curricula in anticipation of opening the new physical plant, Mr. Lebrad knows that that's his work. The elementary teachers know that that's their work. The MSBA has said you have to look at that curriculum because you are going to be an amazing new facility. And what we expect is that your curriculum will be revised so that the facility optimizes what you're doing. So I don't know if you'd like me to read through them and then you can stop me and ask me questions as we go, or if you just want to ask questions about them now. The enrollment growth one I think is pretty straightforward.
The only thing, I love all this. I really love our vision. Every time we go back to it, I love our vision. But the only thing on here that I just wonder if maybe next year I'll get a bullet is I do appreciate the work to gain efficiency as we also add teachers and our district grows. So I think the Munis work is sort of part of the enrollment growth, being more systematic on the back end and more efficient so that we can manage that. So maybe just throwing it out there, in the future we could add, as we grow with our having improved procedures on the back end make a huge difference. And you're doing it anyway, so why not get the credit? So.
Other questions?
All right, I'll go to meeting every student's needs. I'll tell you a little bit about multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. When we talk about that, it's really a way to systematically grow what you're doing so that you are
looking at data, you're progress monitoring, you're ensuring that every kid has what they need. So with MTSS, for example, we may look at math data, but we might also say we need a social worker. So it just makes sure that that system is in place so that every kid is getting all of the things that they need. And that's very DESE driven, very DESE driven. But that's some of the work that Carla Burley, our social emotional learning director, and even our special education director of student services is doing. I think the rest of them might be easy for things you've heard of before. The holistic student assessment is, a survey that we give to kids, and it really is a nice way to take the temperature of our kids, in the aggregate, and then really drill down and look to see, if individual students are kind of in that place we would say in the red. So they're kids for us that, that's a warning that we need to do some kind of intervention with that particular student. We do have different kinds of programs, Empower for kids who may have some behavioral needs, Bright for kids who might be coming in after a hospitalization or a concussion. And so those programs are in place, and I think they do a nice job of serving the multiple needs of students in our schools. And they are unique needs, and you might think, oh, how many kids could possibly need these programs? But you'd be surprised at the numbers. So the people who inhabit them, the adults, are doing a great job with our kids. And really the goals of these kinds of programs, are not to provide counseling kids, but really to have them overcome those obstacles so that they can access curriculum.
Go ahead. Question on the development of the 18 to 22 program to offer wider array of post-secondary opportunities. This is beyond the programming that happens in our White House, I'm assuming that.
Yes. So that's a nice question. Our kids go off-site. They go to Framingham State for educational opportunities. They go to different work settings, for vocational opportunities. It's the van is out more than it's in, and so the kids it's really great. They're out of the White House a good portion of the day, doing some pretty cool things.
That's great. I'm looking forward to more of the pop-up of the.
Yeah.
Now, on this one, when I think of meeting every student's needs, the one thing I don't see on here is our differentiated learning. And I know that we do that. I know one of our administrators who left last year was very good at that, at Hopkins. Is there anything going on in that space because a lot of what we have is helping all students access curriculum, making sure that everyone's okay, meeting lots of different kinds of needs, but in terms of pure academics, meeting kids within the classroom where they are with differentiated learning. I know we do it. I don't know if we're still expanding our capabilities among our teachers to do that effectively, or are we where we want to be?
We're definitely doing it, and we don't call it out in this document. And maybe we do call it out in very small specialized spaces. So when we talk about things like specially designed instruction, the goal is to make sure that students who are on IEPs have access to grade level standards, so that we're not saying, okay, you're in this 5th grade classroom, but here's a 3rd grade worksheet for you. So that work is there. The co-teaching work that we're doing in the middle school, obviously we've already done it K-5, so it's not unique to the middle school. It's just on its way up. But that work, I think, is also really important, because there are ways to ensure that differentiation is happening with station teaching or parallel teaching. And if we can continue to grow the repertoires of our educators, that will continue to happen. But I also know that when, like Mrs. Moran, for example, and Mrs. Moriarty are looking at things like STAR scores or other different benchmark scores, they have conversations with the classroom teacher to say, all right, here's a kid who's in grade 4 reading at a 7th grade level. So are we making sure that there is that kind of challenge in the classroom? And I would say yes to that. One of the things that and I know that when we've done different presentations before, one of the things that we'll say is that we are lucky in Hopkinton that we don't have like a single student in a classroom who's reading at the 7th grade level in 4th grade, but we have enough students that we could cohort them and design small instruction for them within a general education classroom. And I've probably missed a lot of things, so jump right in.
No, I think you hit all of them. I think about the work we're doing, looking at the way our 5th and 6th graders are doing math, for instance, and taking a microscope to what that looks like and how we can make sure that in a given classroom on a given day, students that have whatever need is being presented, they're getting something, and that something is exceptional. So I think there's a lot of really good things there. I know the last bullet under this plan section talks about the professional learning communities and the work of our professionals, along with our administrators and our curriculum specialists, to spend that time that is guaranteed in our schedules each week for our teachers to be able to come together and plan, look at data, and make decisions based on it. And so we want to not only use that, but maximize that time. Because if we do that well, our teachers are going to be able to go back into the classrooms and do some really good stuff. We're also hoping that they're working, as the cliche goes, smarter, not harder. When they work together, they can share resources and thinking in a true sense of collaboration, which makes sure that every student's getting what they need when they need it.
Thank you. I apologize. I missed the little differentiation word on there. So I do apologize. It is on there. And just, I like that you included students who are, maybe beyond where the class is, because I think we have a lot of focus, rightly so, on making sure that everybody's who's struggling has what they need, but also making sure those who need to be engaged at a different level in a different way are also getting connected in. Thank you.
All right. And then the last one, building a community of respect and collaboration. Working still with CPAC and LPAC. One of the things that Jen Suker, our Director of English Language Acquisition, Equity, and Access, will be doing is implementing family interviews with multilingual families. Mr. Bishop has his vision of the graduate work going on, continuing our work in restorative justice. I mean, we've made a lot of progress there, so that feels really good. PBIS, the CRIOP, we have our equity audit, and so, the people from Promoting Good will be coming in to have a conversation with us, and we now have the money to do that curricular audit as well, so that we can take a look at our curricula and say, are they sort of free of bias and anti-racism? So a lot of work being done there, and I don't want to just gloss over the CRIOP because you're going to see it in every school improvement plan this year. Pillars 1 and 4 have been sort of our focus. Number 1 says, are we creating a classroom community and a school community where every kid feels like they're part of the fabric of that place? And 4 is the one that talks about academics. So those are the ones that we are primarily focused on, but any pillar goes.
Okay. Questions on the entire district improvement plan? Comments? And we are looking for a vote on that tonight.
Yes, if you feel comfortable doing that, that would be great.
Now, is this already been posted up, or will it be posted up?
After you vote on it, it will go.
Okay.
Yeah. The last year iteration is always on the website.
Right. Any thoughts?
I'm so quiet tonight.
Yeah, you're very quiet. I'm having a hard time getting a read. Go ahead, Susan.
I move that we approve the 23-24 district improvement plan.
Motion by Susan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Any abstain or opposed? Okay, and that is unanimous. Thank you to all of the hard work from all of your team to get that up. All right, that brings us into policy IJL, library media materials selection. This is the first reading, and Dr. Kavanaugh, we have you up there for that.
Sure. So we already had a policy IJL, and the last time it was read was in 2009. And I don't know that we would have thought to bring it forward so much as our school librarians did. And so they had come and said, we really feel like we need to take a look at the media material selection for our libraries. And they also said that it felt very dated to them that we hadn't looked at it since 2009. And so over the summer, I said, sure, I'd be happy to meet with you. But one of the things I asked them to do before I met with them was to take the current policy, put it into a Google Doc, and then using the suggesting feature, just redline it and put in what they felt sort of was appropriate. And then after that, our policy working group with Susan, Amanda, and I took a look at it, and there were a couple of places that, you know, we may have made some changes, and I think that our changes that you see are just the purple strike-throughs, either on page 1, 2, or on page 3, you see some purple font that we included. And then I went back to the librarians and said, so, there are very few changes, and you'll see them in purple font, and that's how we got to where this policy is right now.
Okay. Anything else from the policy working group that you want to add to that?
I think, did you mention some other suggestions were made that were more procedural in nature, so,
yes.
by the librarians, so, we don't typically put procedure in policy because it's procedure. And policy is meant to stand the test of time a little bit more. Procedures can change, so, there's sort of additional work being done to, with the administration in the buildings and the librarians to work on policy. But it's referenced in here that those procedures will be used if there's a need. So those procedures are outside of this, but they're referenced and they're being developed.
So now the building principals have seen the procedures, the librarians have seen the procedures, and they'll all come together in first an elementary group, then a secondary group in October.
Okay. This is a first reading. We don't typically vote after a first reading, but are there comments or questions that people would like to have sent back for consideration by the working policy group?
I like this policy. I think it's like very representative of what the school's looking to do, the whole district, and inclusion, diversity, and awareness, and expanding our students' appreciation of the global world.
I agree with that. I also appreciate that the librarians brought this forward.
Yes.
After 2009 is a very long time in our policy.
I love our librarians.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know, for a while, we didn't have them at the middle school and high school, and they've been restored, and they're amazing.
Right. Yeah, well, and I was thinking at the middle school, most of those kids were not even born in 2009, so.
That's awful. That's a terrible thought.
Wow.
Makes me feel very old.
All right, so I don't know, did you receive any feedback on that? I saw the policies did go out.
No.
Okay. All right, so we'll bring that back for a second reading.
Okay.
All right, I've got to scroll back up to get my agenda going. All right, so that brings us then to the project update, Mrs. Roderick.
Thank you. Okay, so we will start with the solar update. In a brief summary, the rooftop installations have been completed. The Hopkins rooftop is live. The high school and middle school rooftops are awaiting the electrical switchgear. And again, this gets into supply chain issues. The canopy installations at the high school bus lot is currently underway. An estimated substantial completion is October. And then the canopy installation at the middle school will begin in November when the high school is complete. The estimated substantial completion for that one is January of '24. So looking at our rooftop installations, you can see what is circled in red is the new installation for the high school. What you see not circled was existing solar panels that have been on the roof for a number of years. And again, waiting for that switchgear, hopefully in October. Then we need to file for permission to operate with Eversource, which could take another 4 to 6 weeks. So our go-live date could be out into December for the high school.
You're not able to apply until the switchgear is here.
No, because it has to be fully inspected and everything else. So it has to be live. Eversource basically will then turn it on. So. Looking at the rooftop installation for the middle school, again, is what's circled, and you can see that this was a substantial addition to what was already on the middle school. And that follows the same timeline. We're waiting for the switchgear for the middle school as well. When we look at the Hopkins School, that is a brand-new installation. There were not any solar panels on Hopkins, so everything you see there is new. And there you can see it on the side of the roof. And the Hopkins, the switchgear did arrive, and this is live, as I said. So looking again at the savings, the estimated savings for the high school rooftop for this year was $21,000. For the middle school rooftop was $48,000. And for the Hopkins rooftop was $33,000. Those were the savings that we actually took as a reduction to the operating budget this year, which we'll get into next. So looking at the solar canopies, this is the bus lot. So phase one was actually just trenching from the building to the bus lot, which brought the electrical over. That was done in August, and that's complete. So phase two is, you can see the left side, canopy one. They'll fully install phase one. That is supposed to happen during the month of September. Phase two will be the second canopy, and that will happen during the month of October. Then they will also connect to the existing switchgear, which is what will light up the high school roof, and then file for their permission to operate for the bus lot. Moving over to the middle school lot, phase one will be the foundations in the upper section that you can see the construction fence. That would be in November. And this lot construction will not begin until the bus lot is complete, the construction. So phase two will be the foundations in the section of the parking lot that is closer to the building. Phase three, they'll put the steel and the PV modules on that closer section to the building. And in this picture, you can see the construction fence actually goes all the way over to the grass area, but we've gotten them to tighten that up. So the construction fence will stay with close to the red areas where the actual PV modules will be installed. Then moving to phase four, again, then they'll do the upper part of the parking lot. And again, that construction fence is not going to take away those parking spaces. Then phase five, they move back and actually daisy chain the electrical to all of the panels. And that would happen in late January. So looking at the canopies, the high school canopy estimated savings for year one was $34,000, and the savings for the middle school was $7,000. So when we get to where we are in terms of our budget impact, so you can see that the high school rooftop and the middle school rooftop, we did a budget reduction of the $21,000 and the $48,000. The Hopkins roof, again, is live. We did a reduction of $33,000, but that is operating. So you can see right now we are running a negative variance of $28,000 based on those two not being lit up at this time. Looking at the canopies, because of the time it takes for construction and then pushing out and getting that final permission to operate from Eversource, we'll push them close to the end of next year. So we're not going to really get a lot of relief of them coming online earlier. So this is what we're looking at for right now. Any questions on solar?
I have a question about the Hopkins. Are we concerned at all about damage or anything when we're doing the construction, like how do those play into the addition that we're putting on? Are we planning to put solar on the addition as well, eventually?
Well, we haven't gotten to what that would be
Yeah.
on the addition, but the addition, and Jeff actually used this word, very appropriate. The addition is really kind of just a bolt-on to the end of the building.
Yeah.
So it will not affect the roof. While
Okay.
we talked about the touch points, those are all interior touch points.
Okay.
So it should not affect the,
It's good, 'cause
The
we did a lot of
installation.
work, so.
yeah.
we don't
And
mess it up.
they've also been looking at the orientation of the addition
Yeah.
so as not to shade
Oh,
the existing panels.
Oh, that's-
So
that's
there has been
wonderful.
consideration for that as well.
they have it all covered, so do you. Thank you.
Can you talk about the parking lots? Are we able to construct around the buses? Have we had to relocate them? And like with the middle school parking lot, what are we doing with those spaces that are within even the tightened construction fence?
So with the bus lot, we have been able to still operate within the zone outside of the construction fence. So we're still operating using that lot. We've had about 6 buses that actually park back in the Connolly bus lot, not in Hopkinton.
In Ashland.
In Ashland,
Okay.
just to alleviate a little bit of that pressure, but we're fully functioning using the bus lot.
And do
So,
we have to pay for that? Yeah, because we used to
No.
pay rental. They're letting us just do that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's fully functioning and is not a problem. For the high school, what we have done right now is students who have parking stickers are just asked, even from the beginning of the school year, not to park in this lot. So when we get to the point where we are blocking off spaces, those spaces that students are not using is where staff will get pushed to. So they've figured out a full parking plan that should not be too disruptive.
It's amazing, but I can't imagine, knowing our parking challenges, that we can take, I mean, technically, there will be spaces that are not accessible, right?
Yes, anything that is within that construction fence is not accessible.
So will we have, more in K lot or J lot, or is that what we're
Yeah,
doing?
so
Just
students have been
offloading?
pushed to the exterior lots, and we are not selling to juniors right now until this is complete.
There we go.
Because
Okay.
I have noticed at the middle school the number of spots available.
Yes,
And I assumed it wasn't because people didn't want the.
right.
So have we had additional purchases of bus passes, more than normal for the,
No,
no, okay.
no. Because typically what would happen, juniors usually buy their parking passes during the year because they don't get licensed until the year has started.
Okay.
So many times what they'll do is they'll buy a bus pass and then transfer it over to a parking pass during the school year.
Okay.
So it wouldn't have an effect either way, and it's just really a transfer of revenue,
Yeah,
so.
thank you.
So, moving on, and we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, is the marathon update. So just looking at the building from the very front, blends in seamlessly with the new building. This is a picture of the interior classrooms, and the furniture is there, just waiting on final touches to be done with flooring and countertops. More pictures of the classrooms. The toilet rooms, all the fixtures have been installed in there at this point. So the window functionality tests have been done. The flooring is completed mostly within the classrooms and will continue down the corridors. You saw the rooftop unit that was installed. They'll tie that in over the next couple of weeks and then have that commissioned. And then the final inspections and startups will take place prior to September 25th. And that is when Mill City Construction expects to turn the building over, and that is 1 month ahead of schedule. And as I noted earlier on, we will also bring this project in under budget.
That's fantastic.
That should be the pop-up on it.
Good point. Yeah.
And we should also have a little commendation to Mrs. DeBow, who's been living in an under construction building with absolute grace.
Yes.
And Mr. Person is integral in all of this as well. It's been great.
All right, thank you for that update on all of those.
Well, I guess I shouldn't have turned off.
Any questions before we move on? Okay. All right, then that brings us into old business. And first up in the old business is the capital plan, which is a big night for you.
Yeah. I just turned off my video, but apparently not. So this is really a relook at the capital plan that we did a couple of meetings ago, and the difference will be having a more solid Elmwood number. But just to remind the community what we had talked about in terms of capital plan. So the state and local governments should prepare and adopt comprehensive, fiscally sustainable, and multi-year capital plans to ensure effective management of capital assets. And I'll skip to the bottom. It is extremely difficult for governments to address the current and long-term needs of their citizens without a sound multi-year capital plan that clearly identifies capital needs, funding options, and operating budget impacts. So that just talks about the need to always be preparing a multi-year plan. And looking at the Town of Hopkinton financial management policies that is on the website, and this is their capital program policies. The town has made a practice of funding the operating budget at the expense of capital items, resulting in a backlog of pending capital requirements and deferred maintenance, which could ultimately lead to critical failures and increased costs. The town should strive to ensure that capital items are not funded through operating budgets and should seek to ensure that capital items are properly funded even in times of financial constraint in order to prevent larger costs or losses later. And the Capital Improvement Committee and the town manager will continue to maintain a rolling 5-year list of anticipated capital needs, and the list should be reviewed and updated annually. So just taking back to where we were in the spring and the items that were presented both to the school committee and to the appropriations committee, you can see the items that are highlighted. This was the information we had at the time. The Elmwood renovation project was at $170 million. The middle school, high school design was looked at as part of the long-term plan. The Loop Road and traffic pattern and relocating the tennis courts in need of future parking. So all of those items were things that were put on there with the information that we had at the time. And again, looking at these plans annually becomes extremely important. So the Hopkinton Public Schools strategic plan, which you just interestingly heard about again, to plan for enrollment growth drove the Perkins Eastman district-wide study project. The projected net cost for the Elmwood School is an estimate and not yet fully defined prior to the final MSBA reimbursement. The projected cost for the Hopkins addition is a soft cost and not yet fully defined. The Marathon Playground and the Track and Field project were approved by the school committee for '24, but not approved by the town manager. These projects were then moved to FY25. So again, looking at the district-wide study, this was a stoplight analysis that was presented many times, and it shows what the Elmwood project moving another grade, 2, 3, 4, allows the building to go into the green, and this is looking at enrollment as it progresses through the years, and then the size of our buildings and how we're able to accommodate those that enrollment growth. Green being fine, yellow meaning that we're starting to get tight and using non-traditional spaces. And in the red, we're now 20% over our target and really need additional space. So you can see the Hopkins addition, even with the Elmwood project, still stays within the red. So that drove both of those projects. Then when you look at these plans again annually, and these are the decision points. So if the Elmwood project has a successful vote, then one grade moves off the middle school, high school, and Hopkins campus, resulting in less demand for parking. That allows to cut the project of the relocating the tennis courts for additional parking of $4 million. And again, with one grade moving out of the middle school parent traffic flow, that allows you to cut the reconfiguration of the traffic flow within the middle school, high school campus of $2.2 million. If the Elmwood project and the Hopkins addition have a successful vote, then the middle school, high school study design can move. Moving the 6th grade to Hopkins creates approximately 10 classrooms available for the high school. This creates capacity up to year 28 to stay in the green if used at 100% capacity. The high school typical capacity is 85% due to scheduling. The feasibility design project timeline can then adjust depending on the actual enrollment and utilization for the middle school, high school project. If the Elmwood project has a successful vote, the marathon design study, the current Elmwood school will be available for potential relocation of the preschool. And again, the permanent building committee this is part of their study. Relocating the preschool program could open up 6 classrooms at the marathon to absorb the marathon enrollment, with the exception of the common areas such as the cafeteria. The feasibility study project timeline should remain in FY26 to study those potential options. But any design and construction project can be adjusted depending on the actual enrollment and those feasibility study options. If the Hopkins addition has a successful vote, the Loop Road and Sidewalk project could potentially be wrapped into the full project of the Hopkins addition. So this project could move to FY27 to coincide with the Hopkins, or it could be removed entirely. So looking at the evolution of the Elmwood project costs, the original number was approximately $170 million, and that's when we were really looking at buckets or containers, as Vertex like to refer to them. The further we went into design and decisions made by the elementary school building committee was able to bring the project into a more defined scope and cost estimate down to $158,427,494. And again, that is the gross cost before reimbursement from the MSBA. So looking at that total project budget, you also have rebates that will come into play. Mass Save rebates, the Inflation Reduction Act rebates, and then your potential MSBA rebate. So that will bring your potential town contribution down in the range of $105 million to $108 million. And the $158 million, just as a reminder, includes the $1 million that was already appropriated that we're spending now for this feasibility phase. So when you look at all those adjustments and then now bringing the Elmwood cost down to that 158, and again, this is the gross cost that would have to go to town meeting. It is before the MSBA reimbursement. But it does shift what you're looking at in terms of your 5-year capital plan.
So I didn't have all the math as you were going along, and my eyes maybe not quite good enough to pick up all the figures in there, but in terms of what we are looking at, if Hopkins and Elmwood are both approved, it's many millions of dollars.
So 80 million for the middle school, high school gets pushed off. And I could go back to.
And then it was the
The 2.2 million for the traffic pattern within the campus, and the 4 million, which was the additional parking by relocating.
12 million less because of the savings to the Elmwood project.
Yes.
Now I'm just, in my head, I'm looking at the number that went into the town's spreadsheet of the
Right.
capital plan versus what we could potentially do if we're able to do both Elmwood and Hopkins.
Correct.
And then if we do in the original, when we're looking at doing the feasibility on Marathon and being able to look at the Elmwood, is the cost for what we would have spent on doing an addition for the preschool still in that figure?
It is not in the figure, so what we have done here is only included the feasibility study to really define your options. Because the cost, for one thing, what we keep talking about is the students that we're planning for this have not even been born yet.
Right.
So as we continue to look at enrollment, and as we start to look at what are the options with the Elmwood School, there's too many variables to really define what you're doing.
Right.
So the only thing that you're carrying here is that feasibility.
And it would be beyond 5 years before we're looking to do something beyond the feasibility
Right.
anyway. That also, and I think we did this in the spring, takes the $21 million out that had been discussed for the preschool and central office. Was that?
That was out.
That was out a while.
That was out a while ago.
But I think
But it
it
didn't
carried in
come
the
back.
town.
It didn't come back.
It didn't come back, but I felt
The
like that
town
was still
has
in the
been
town side.
carrying it.
And
The town has been showing old information from prior to when this was presented to appropriations and everyone else.
So that, to me, rough math is like over $116 million. If we're able to do both of these projects, we could potentially save in our 5-year capital plan $116 million,
correct.
which is a significant, and I know that our taxpayers and people that are, watching what we're doing capital-wise, I think a lot of people appreciate how closely you and all of us have wanted to look at the capital plan to be able to appreciate savings in other areas.
Right. And again, this just reiterate that this is something that you do annually. And
Yes.
you've done that annually for as long as I've been here, and I'm sure prior to me.
Right.
So it is an annual process. Information changes all the time.
Right. And certainly, if we don't have positive outcomes from the votes of Elmwood and Hopkins, it's going to change what we're looking at. But it is, I think I said 116, it's actually 119 million. Do we want to take a vote to endorse this as the 5-year capital plan as it exists with the contingency of if the Hopkins and Elmwood projects are approved, to approve this as a 5-year capital plan, understanding that there are variables that could change that we're not even aware of right now? Does that make sense? I think that does signal to other boards as well as other people watching that we are serious about what we're doing here.
So the implications of our voting this, hopefully for me, would be that the town would use our projections, our voted projections in their model. So would that be conveyed through you to the,
I could send this
Yeah.
along to the town manager.
and I would just like to say that as you look at these projects, there's no fat in this. I mean, things like the track and field, I know people have questions about I know the track is at end of life. And the field, not only does it need to be something, we need to address it because we're dealing with the track around it, but we have a major capacity issue, again, because of our growth, for how we accommodate the activities that our students want to do that are healthy, that are engaged in the school and so forth. So, you know, the track, if we want to have a track program, we're going to have to do that. And then the field space is, in my personal opinion, really a lot about enrollment growth and accommodating our students, which we struggle to do. And that's a huge piece of real estate that has a very limited use, the field, currently.
Yep.
But
Yes, so I think it signals through conveying that to the town what numbers they should be using, which are not just the 119 million difference that we have from what we've been looking at, but another 21 million that they hadn't pulled off from the preschool central office building, so $140 million less than what the town, and that will help for the town's planning abilities in terms of looking at taxes.
Also helps with the conversation at large.
I think so.
And I believe the select board chairperson requested, you know, longer term projections. I'm assuming she meant updated.
She did.
Because that's-
I did have a conversation with her several weeks ago, I guess it was, about how we had this conversation when we did have the conversation, and that there were significant differences between what we're actually looking at for a 5-year plan and what the town has in their spreadsheets of what we're looking at. So
The work that you've done isn't different from what you do every year. This is it's just as detailed and thoughtful as it was last year. It's not different, right?
It's not different.
Yeah. So you're doing what you always do, right?
you are, but you have a lot of balls in the air still.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm struck by every question that we give you. Like I say it all the time. I appreciate that. Always. Thank you.
Among building projects and solar projects.
Right.
It's a lot
And you
of
know all
projects.
the things. You all know all the things. Like, anyway.
All right, so is there a motion to adopt the FY 2024 5-year capital planning document as updated by Mrs. Rothermere?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, motion by Holly, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Adam, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much for your work on that.
Thank you.
And not just
Thank
one
you.
time, but we keep seeming to bring this back, so. All right, that brings us down to the superintendent's goals and indicators.
So they are again in your packet. And I know that I've brought them forth and kind of walked you through them a couple of times, so I don't know if there are any questions in them or if you want me to go through anything. I'm happy to do that. Or if you are in a place where you think I've seen them.
Are there changes since the last discussion?
No, there are not.
Are there, I don't have any questions in that case. Are there others who have questions, comments, anything? I personally am at a place where, because we've had several discussions on this, I am comfortable entertaining a vote on this tonight, if others are as well.
I think, based on prior conversations I brought to the board, I will abstain from this vote until we talk about our district evaluation, because in my opinion, my thoughts on either, they're kind of dependent on each other, if that makes sense.
Okay, so one thing I'm just going to pull out is that when we discussed district evaluation, you did such a great job with the presentation last time. What we had discussed was bringing that back when we have the equity audit results, so that we can kind of compare and look at what information we're looking for to kind of launch the next steps
Yeah,
of that.
I saw it on tonight's agenda.
It is, that's an accident.
Okay.
We are not actually going to discuss that tonight, because that was what, in the agenda planning process, what had been conveyed was that we were moving the items forward from the last when we did our working session. It was an oversight on my part personally, because my recollection was that we were not going to discuss it until we had the equity audit results. I don't know if anybody has a different recollection.
I think I took something different away from the conversation, but that's not to say that I'm correct. Right. So.
Okay.
What did you take away?
I thought it was going to be
tell.
because there was a conversation about the potential for a working group, There, like, I had a different thought about it, and, yeah.
I do think that is a piece of what, I have that recollection as well, that we were
Yeah.
talking about doing a working group to kind of look at what we have, but my other piece of the recollection is we were not going to discuss the specifics of that until we had the equity audit presentation.
Yeah,
Which
well,
was not
I
ready
think
for
climate
that.
and equity are, climate includes equity, but climate is not equity, right? Like, so that's
What's the
how,
positive, what is it, who's the company that did
Promoting growth.
Promoting growth,
good,
right.
I'm sorry.
promoting good?
because the focus wasn't specifically our staff, right? That's kind of the crux of the district evaluation climate discussion from my perspective. Is
The
that,
staff.
yeah, because we
Oh,
have, 80% of our budget is staff.
Yeah.
And so data from our staff on non-curricular, more social, emotional, more perspective of working environment. We put a huge amount of investment in our staff, and I think we should ensure that we're investing it correctly and that we're taking care of our investment. That's my perspective on it.
So I would love staff perspective, but I guess when you were talking, what I was thinking was that we were doing something that was like a 360 view.
Yeah.
That we were also
Right.
looking for the community
Right.
and.
But if I'm thinking about an equity perspective, that seems more curricular focused from a student perspective, as opposed to like family engagement / staff perspective.
Do you want to talk about the
And
the
maybe
equity
I'm misunderstanding.
audit
right?
that was done?
Yes, the equity audit didn't cover curriculum.
It did.
No, but there is a portion of it that talks about climate in our schools.
Is it from a staff perspective?
There are some parts, there are family, student, and staff, and I think I had shared those bar graphs with
did.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the questions do ask, do you feel like our kids are being well-served academically in the hub? But there are other questions that talk about, do you think that every kid feels part of the community, for example? And the interesting part about the work that Promoting Good did was that they didn't just have a survey, but they also had focus groups.
Right.
And, we could invite people to be a part of them. And so some of the people who were part of them were teachers, so they had an opportunity to, sort of share the way they were feeling. But we also had lots of families, and some of them are people who belong to groups that are historically marginalized.
Right.
So
I think
I
that-
do think the data they bring forth will be interesting to the
I think it's excellent, that data, but I think it's also maybe not inclusive as to the presentation that I had given was more focused on staff from a vertical perspective and a horizontal perspective. How do our policies look to staff that are trying to utilize it, whether it's addressing concerns, interactions with parents, support from the internal school community, support from the external school community, things like that, like a 360 from a staff perspective. Like if I'm looking at my peers, if I'm looking up, if I'm looking down, how does that feel? How does that look? And is there opportunities for growth? Are there places we do really, really good work that we can expand? Things like that.
So I think a lot of that would have to do with evaluation of administrators, too.
Sure, yeah. So maybe I didn't present, maybe that's on me. That's probably.
I'm not disagreeing, though, with
Yeah.
what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm having a hard time kind of understanding is how that relate, like, the superintendent needs to have goals, whether we do the
I
district.
agree.
So
But I don't know, so my thought was, if we're not going to pursue that work now, is there any sort of information we can ask for some additional objectivity within the superintendent's goals and evaluations? Like, we had this conversation last year, I think, as well, but I kind of hopped in too late with the ask, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so I apologize, I did not intend for that to happen, I thought I had that turned off. So when we had that conversation, I guess it was probably in the spring, yes?
Yeah.
I think what was the challenging part was that we had already discussed the
Oh, yeah.
superintendent's evaluation.
Right.
And it was hard to move
Yeah.
stream on that piece of it. I don't know why this keeps not going away. I guess what was envisioning from what you had presented at our working session was that there was a way to do both of these things, that it did
Oh.
not have to take the
That was
place
that
of
was
it.
the ask to the committee. Do you think we can do both of those things? Do you think that there's a benefit to doing both of those things? I think that what I said is like we don't deal in frivolity, so everything we do, we try to do to the best of our ability, right? And that's that would be I guess that's the question now. If folks think there's an opportunity to do both things, and yeah, that's the question.
I think we can do both.
Okay.
But
Well, then-
I guess if I just sort of play out the hypothetical, if we said we wanted input before we set the goals, I fear because we're on the academic calendar, we'd be
Yeah.
too far in to give Dr. Kavanaugh time to achieve the goals.
Sure.
Because we're already in September.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering if this is a year where we gather the data to inform next year's goals. I think I heard Dr. Kavanaugh say she'd prefer to be, her choice, evaluated every year
Yeah.
on something.
Right.
And I think we have indicators and goals. I think what I'm hearing you say is we'd like to get more information to inform the goals.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's how we
Right.
would use that.
Yeah. It's like the idea is developmental, not evaluative. Like we can't do the first year and evaluate us on anything that comes from that data. That has to be like informing and developmental as we move forward. Like
Yeah.
future proofing the district in a way, if that makes sense.
I also think it would be, some of that data might be stuff that might be used in next year's district improvement plan. for
Right.
example.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that it provides information that's useful for many iterations and it establishes a baseline for future groups to discuss, perhaps.
One of the things I had said at our working session, in terms of when I bring up the equity audit, is that I feel like some of the information that we get from that, because that is coming from a variety of different stakeholders, might actually inform questions we want more information on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That
I agree
it's
with
not.
that.
I'm not looking to substitute one for the other.
No.
But I'm looking to kind of not just duplicate what's been done, but to be
Yeah.
able to use one
Yeah.
to help.
Yeah. Based on like my work that I do for like process improvement and program evaluation in like hospitals, that we always we can take the data that we have to inform the data that we want, right? Like that's how all of it
Exactly.
goes.
That's
right? Yeah.
more eloquently said than, but that's what I'm, I think, getting at.
Maybe more eloquent than I should be at night.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of potentially using this as a opportunity to gather the data to find out if we just jump in without having the data, then we really don't have a direction where we
Yeah.
want to see it go.
I like it.
So if we gather that information from the reports and surveys, what have you, that'll sort of help us to identify, like we talked about in the working group, you know, what are the factors that are driving these goals that we have. You know, we don't know. We don't know, and the drivers that we settle on, once we start collecting the data on those, we might find out that we're looking at the wrong thing. Right, so we start off with a set of strategic drivers, and then evaluate the data. We can do that almost in real time, so that we can have the opportunity, if we need to change what our drivers are.
And I'm wondering if the data you're talking about are things that are in the superintendent's evaluation rubric? Like, is that the data that you're interested in finding more about? Because I know that those are the criteria on which superintendents are evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, as I read it, I think the answer to that question is yes. It's just how do, you know, these are great goals, but how do we quantify those, and what is it that are driving those specific initiatives? So,
Right, so as I develop those goals, and you know, from looking at the DESI website, there has to be something that I see in terms of data that says there's a hole here. And
Exactly.
the district needs to work toward filling it, you know.
Exactly.
Whether it's data that I've taken from a DESI website, or from Star Reading or Star Math, or a consultant came in and gave us a report, those are all the places where I
Exactly.
tend to get data.
That's sort of why are we doing these things? And that data collection helps to back that up.
Yeah.
So I think the gap, which maybe, and this actually, it's funny because we're going to talk about our goals at midnight tonight when we get to that. But I think the gap, so we're an oversight board. So from what I know, I think the administrators in the buildings and in the district have a lot of data.
Right.
We don't necessarily have it in the way, like, for example, we didn't, I'm going to butcher the name again, Promoting Good. We didn't commission like the Promoting Good study. I was happy that we didn't do it, but I was happy to see that it had been done at our workshop, and then we know we're going to get the report out. So part of it is, how do we get comfortable that, as an oversight board, that we're working on the right things? I think it is, and we can add, like, and I think in the goals, and the goals in particular, the indicators are a little different, because the indicators are like capacities that every superintendent needs, and we pick a set of capacities to kind of highlight each year, but they're all part of the job. So the indicators are a little bit of a different animal. The goals more are, you know, ones that have been brought forward, and I think we can say to Dr. Kavanaugh, why is this the goal over any other goal?
Exactly.
So we have a couple ways to go about it. We can ask Dr. Kavanaugh why, and hear that reason, and find out, like, maybe what would be the next one if you had a sixth one? Which one fell off the list? Or we can independently come up with our own view on what it should be, which sounds kind of like where you're going to say, like, if we ask it a different way, do we get a different insight? If we ask versus, and that's where I think, I mean, I know there's a ton of data swirling around central office and the offices in every school, but we may not be comfortable. Like, what I'm hearing is it might be some discomfort of not knowing why these goals surface to the top.
Well, I presume that when Dr. Kavanaugh creates her goals, she is creating goals that at some point we have asked to see, or are part of an ongoing improvement plan, or like the goals match the other things we say. These are very logical to me. These make sense. The goals and indicators are not my issue. I understand them. I read through them last year. I understood them. They make sense. They're logical. I appreciate the detail with which she presents what she is working on. I think when I look at our district improvement plan, and when I look at goals and indicators, I have not seen, and this could be oversight on my part, I have not seen any specific goals or indicators of building respect and collaboration among our staff. Not when we're talking about how we want what our students to learn from our staff, but specifically within our staff, right? And that is a vision for the district, so it has to start at the staff level to get to our kiddos, right? So that's my question, and that's what, for me, just 20% of a 4 to 5, that's where the gap exists for me. Like, understanding how we're ensuring our staff feels considered and heard and respected, and do you see what I'm saying? Because it's such a huge percentage of our budget. We're spending $48 million a year on our staff. Yeah. Are we ensuring that we're appropriately understanding the needs and the wants of that huge population of people that are so essential to the functioning of the school from every level, from the top to the bottom, right? And from a policy perspective, right, we have policies about how people get things done or how they let us know if there are problems. Do those function as we intend? Like, we're policy and budget and oversight, and those, for me, they all logically line up. then maybe this information exists somewhere that I am missing.
Or maybe you want a goal that is not, maybe you want to ask for a goal. Like,
That's
I think
that
that'd be-
is what I would say. But so the last iteration, and I realized I asked in the middle of the evaluative session, which not helpful. Not helpful. My own fault. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And but maybe that's the more appropriate ask, is to say, where does this information exist? Do we collect this data? If we do, how do we collect it? Where does it come from? I believe that people know how to do the job. I just want to see if the things that we think are working, and how are they working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask them if they're happy?
Yes, that's part of it.
Are you happy in your job?
Yes, but maybe a little bit more, asking more specifically, like,
Right.
is this a place where you feel supported? When you have a concern, do you feel heard? These kinds of things, they're really essential to, like, overall well-being, and they impact
Yeah.
the learning environment and our kiddos' ability to learn in a classroom, right?
So would you like me to ask the administrators to apply that to their evaluation? Because I think that that's really where teachers are heard, right?
Yeah.
By the building principals.
Perhaps that's the appropriate level, and I think that's, maybe I've been trying to say it, but very verbosely and not in a very linear fashion.
Of course, then again, depending, based on my own history, whether a faculty would be honest with an administrator in their building.
Right. Well, I think it needs to be collected in a way where folks are
Yeah,
are
it's-
incentivized or feel safe providing
Yeah.
the information.
Well, I think our building principals do ask that of the teachers, because they do have surveys that come back at the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they do use it really for their own growth. So I don't know that I would feel comfortable saying, like, let's make that public, but they do use it for their own
Well,
growth.
I'm talking about like for the purposes of oversight and governance, how are we ensuring our staff are like heard and considered and feel happy within their jobs? I think that is, like, I don't want to have somebody say, like, I really hate it here and this person, whatever. Like, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how are we ensuring our staff is happy? And happy has obviously like a spectrum of meaning, because what makes one person feel happy is not the same for other people.
Yes, and I don't know, I mean, maybe this is going off on a tangent, but I feel like there are so many variables that may or may not make a person happy in the workplace. Like
Right.
remuneration could be considered something that makes me happy, right? If
Right.
I make enough money, I feel happy here. Or the people who work on my team make me feel happy. Or if I go down to the main office, my principal will always say, sure, come on in, and I'm happy to listen to you. Or every year I get whatever resources I need. All of those things contribute to people feeling happy. So
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, I feel like
it's a very broad question.
well, I wouldn't ask that question.
Right.
That's not the question I would ask. It would look different if it's in process. But the overall idea is, are we ensuring our staff, whether or not they have every resource they need, how are we ensuring that they feel heard and concerns are documented, and when they have issues with a family or a student, how is that handled? Do they feel supported in their classroom? Do they feel supported outside their classroom? Those kinds of things.
So those are really building level issues. So I can talk with the building principals about it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm not sure I'm totally clear on where we are.
I
But
feel
so
like I took us on a
I do feel like my vision, I think, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, Holly, or anybody else, but of a district climate would be to get at some of the information, but also to get at information for how are we serving the
Yeah.
community? Are they happy with us?
Yeah.
Are they not happy with us?
I wanna know that as well.
Not asked in that way, like you said, but in
Right.
ways to solicit information about how supported people feel,
Right.
how they feel that the policies that we're working on, the budget that we're
Are we
working towards.
prioritizing what is important to them?
Right.
And I feel that the like communications too. Are we communicating with people in effective ways where they understand what's happening? Because I feel like sometimes when a big thing comes up, everyone's like, where did this come from? And like, we've been talking about it for 11 weeks or whatever, you know. So it's ensuring that what we do is out there and people understand what we do, right? And what we can't do.
I'm not sure everybody understands what we can't do, but
But
I want
that's a
people to
piece that's kind of outside of this particular agenda item, and I realize that, and I will stop.
But this is important though, because
I agree.
so evaluating the superintendent is a third of our job.
Yeah.
And it's like the biggest piece because
Yeah.
we can do nothing we can do nothing that we have to do everything through the superintendent.
Sure.
And so I don't want us as a board to be in a place where only 4 of us feel comfortable evaluating the superintendent.
Yeah.
We all have to do this job.
I agree.
And I want to hear from everybody on the board. So if so anybody's not comfortable with this set of goals, like, in order to evaluate the superintendent, we have to evaluate on goals and the indicators.
Yeah.
So if, like, you expressed a desire to abstain from this, I would like to not vote it and wait till I want you to be in it.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
the idea was I did not want to hold up an essential process because of an issue that seems like exists in just my brain.
We have to
I
make
want to make sure we address the
Yeah.
issues so that we can kind of be together. Oh, I thought that was me, so that's okay. I want to reconcile it so that it feels like we're able to go in a way that feels like we're all feeling good
Okay.
moving forward.
I
So
appreciate that.
Correct.
What are the things that,
often feel that they're unable to make choices or
Look at the Jesse website.
Carol
Thanks,
doesn't
friend.
so, I think we can kind of talk about multiple things here that
All right.
would maybe help, or maybe not. Maybe the only thing that would help is like adding something, subtracting something, time. What would help people? Not, and I'm looking at you because you brought it up, but I'm also looking at everybody else because I think it's important that
I
we all
don't feel looked at.
I'm looking at you.
I don't feel seen.
Well, you didn't get your glamour shots.
Because so what are the pieces that, because I think we've got 3 separate that are kind of related in different ways items here. One is the the superintendent's goals. The school committee goals are ours, and a little bit separate than that. But then further down, we have the superintendent's evaluation format, and then the conversation about the district evaluation. Is one thing, would it help for you to know where the board stands about a district evaluation, even if we're not ready to kind of form all the pieces of it?
Yeah, I mean, and
Or is there more to the first part of the conversation that needs to happen to help people feel good?
I couldn't answer that by myself. I would.
But answer for yourself, and everybody can answer.
I mean, yeah, I would want to know both where Dr. Kavanaugh stands. That's important to me, and the board as a whole. Because right, like, it's me thinking of something doesn't make it
But
a priority.
we're all a team, so
I know.
everybody's voice is a priority.
I appreciate that. So I think these goals and indicators are great. I think they're all like I said, logical, relevant, essential. If I don't know which would be better for the moment, whether it would be to add something to this, and because this is something that Dr. Kavanaugh has worked on outside of our group, or if it's something that it has to be separate. And if it's separate, what does that look like? And it sounds like whatever it is, it's going to be something on Dr. Kavanaugh's plate. And I don't wish to add an additional piece on top of this. That's also something that's a concern of mine.
Okay.
So I guess that's where I stand, and I would be interested to hear my colleagues.
I'm just thinking here. I mean, if a piece of this is we're trying to get a part of it that, for lack of a better term, that happiness piece, that satisfaction piece, and that if that lies within the building, the individual buildings, it might be an opportunity to, however Dr. Kavanaugh wants to examine what's happening within the buildings, have her administrators to see if, whatever it looks like to and again, because happiness is such a broad term.
Right.
First of all, I would ask, how do you quantify that?
You can't. We
Well,
know how to quantify it.
Were you-
Your
yeah.
behavioral health, you know how to quantify it.
But I mean, I'm sure there are validated tools that are out there.
They are.
But I think it wouldn't be for us to dictate, how Dr. Kavanaugh would determine that, we're not going to dictate what tool she should use. It's up to her to kind of figure that piece out. And then, she will process that data that she gathers, and then, then it kind of rolls up from there. I don't think that we should prescribe how it happens.
No, that's not
I mean,
what
I think our measure of is it happening is just that. Is Dr. Kavanaugh doing that? Is she ensuring that process is happening? And to me, that needs to be kind of an initial step, is to gather the data, and then we might gather like I said before, we might gather the data and find out everybody's swell, right? We don't know. So it's gathering that initial set of data to figure out what do you do with it? Do you even need to do anything with it?
Well, and I would assume that everything's okay. No. Right.
Oh, we don't.
You have
Again,
you have a baseline, and the next time you go, you're better, you're worse. What changed?
Right, exactly. And I think that it's, again, I keep coming back to, it's not up to us, it shouldn't be up to us to determine what the people that work for Dr. Kavanaugh feel, think.
Right. I agree.
I think that responsibility solely lies in her realm. So, and to bring that back of what her interpretation of that information is, right? And that should guide what she wants to do with that, or any superintendent, what they want to do with that information. Is it actionable? Do we have to do anything with it, or is it we have higher priorities within the rest of the goals? Again, the sort of, it goes back to that initial question that I was asking about, how are we prioritizing what we're doing? We can throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and plug away at all, but how are we strategic and methodical about the approach that we take? 2 cents.
And I'm looking at you.
She's looking back.
Speechless.
Okay. Can I ask, if you'll indulge me for a second? So in 2021, the admin council in the district sat down and said, what is a good definition for school climate? And we hammered away at it for a little bit. And maybe this is the problem. Maybe we're talking about climate without defining the term, which goes back to the workshop meeting that we had at Town Hall. The school district has defined it, and what we say is school climate reflects how members of the school community experience the school, including interpersonal relationships, teacher and other staff practices, and organizational arrangements. School climate includes factors that serve as conditions for learning and that support physical and emotional safety, connections, and engagement. And then we go on to say that in the Hopkinton Public Schools, we believe that every member of our community is valued for their unique abilities, assets of identity, language, and culture. Every adult and child youth has the responsibility to contribute to creating a safe, welcoming, healthy, and joyful learning environment. We recognize that relationships are central to our individual growth and sense of belonging within our community. So I'm wondering if those are the kinds of things that we're trying to get at here.
Yeah.
Are people feeling like they belong to a community, that they're valued, and really where the heart of that work exists is in a school building, which was why I keep going back to it. Now, I know that I have responsibility for it, and I know that my central office people and all of the building principals and assistant principals, we all have responsibility for making sure that the people in our schools, all the way down to pre-K learners and, everybody has those feelings. And so we can I think, take a look at that, the climate stuff that Promoting Good's gonna bring us, but if we wanna even drill down further, we can do that.
Yeah,
Like, I know that the high school administration every year puts a survey out to their people, and when they get it back, they share it with us. They're not shy about sharing the data.
Well, that's how, that's why I wanted to pull it away from your specific evaluation, because I felt like it is not, I didn't feel like I wanted to tie it to your evaluation, because that kind of says that I am responsible for the entirety of the climate of the school, which I don't believe is the case. The climate is dictated by numerous factors, and the definition you provided is pitch perfect, right? Like, that's, when I think of climate, that's what I think of. Am I in a space where I feel valued and seen and safe?
But I think we only have Dr. Kavanaugh to hold, so we.
Right, but
so we can't say, what we can say is, can you provide evidence that you are ensuring? Like, we
Yeah.
can
Yes.
put, like, for me, when you ask, like, where does it belong? For me personally, if it's something that we want, we should put it in the goal.
Okay.
Because if we want to ask for evidence that the climate as defined by the admin team in whatever, 2021 or whatever that was, is being upheld, and how are you identifying gaps? And how, if we want that to be part of one of the district improvement goals or whatever goal, I would want to put something in there, and what we can do is ask for evidence. Like, how are you doing the job of ensuring that?
Yeah.
To your point, Adam, like, you leave the tools in the how, but as part of the evaluation, make us understand that. Like, you have,
That's-
like,
yeah.
so, because I think that a lot of what we were talking about, like with the, oh my gosh, Promoting Good survey, that, that kind of thing, I think there is a lot of work that goes on, but we haven't asked for it, we don't see it, or we haven't seen it and asked for how are you identifying the gaps. Like, we did see, for example, for the kids, the Metro West Health survey and some of the gaps, and we want to know what's the action plan.
Right.
But we haven't requested that report in that same way. So maybe that is what we do with the goal. And we'd have to find which of the category of goal and where we'd put it, but have that be something, and that is something we could do this year.
Well, that's,
I think.
So I feel like this
Yeah.
is exactly what I've been, but I like understand my hesitation was to say, I don't think that one person can be responsible for the happiness of however many employees. And that was my fear in putting it in the evaluation, because I don't, that's a kind of a heavy burden. That if you understand what I'm trying to say, like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe
I
you
do,
don't.
yeah. I am reluctant, however, to continue to use the word happiness.
No, I
because
don't- you don't need
feel
to
like
use-
people
I
can
feel
come
like-
to work, feel respected, valued, feel like a successful
I threw that out there because I
being.
couldn't think of any other way to help with that.
That definition of climate that you gave is those are all the contributors to happiness from a perspective of staff in a public school, right? Those are, climate is feeling seen and heard and valued, right?
Yeah,
And
well, I
considered.
don't know if that would define happiness, because I could still have all those things
Well,
and be
I'm talking
miserable.
about it from a perspective of, are we doing right by our staff, right? That's from,
Right.
that's
So if
more what I
we're
mean.
using-
Happiness is a misnomer. I can't think of a better term for it, but it's,
So I mean, I don't know as we have to think of another term. Just call it what
Climate.
it's defined.
Climate. Yeah.
Climate environment, or whatever it is.
And I just want to make sure that we're looking at this reciprocally, that I worry when we say, is the staff feeling seen and heard? Because they are, all the time. I mean, if you walk into someone's office and said, hey, do you have a minute? There's not an administrator in this district that wouldn't say, of course. And when we sit down to do professional learning, very often we'll say, all right, we're going to put you guys in this group and you're going to brainstorm what this should look like. I mean, if you go to Mr. Bishop's SML retreat, you see them really leading the district in those kinds of ways. So what I like to think about is that the communication is open, not that people are heard depending on where they fall hierarchically.
well, that's just kind of, it was kind of a way of summarizing it. I think that the
I like that
definition
word, heard.
Yeah.
reciprocally. Yeah.
I feel like your definition of climate is that is it. Like, how are we ensuring a climate that is what we aim it to be within our vision, our mission? How are we ensuring that climate exists
and
for
I
our
think-
staff?
And I think that definition that you read, Dr. Kavanaugh, hit those key points.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was.
Yes, and that is part of the work that we're doing this year. I mean, we talked about getting that climate team together last year, and it didn't happen. This year, we're back on track with it.
Is it in here? In the goals?
Last year, it was an indicator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, if I'm hearing everybody
And it
here.
was one portion of an indicator,
Yeah.
that fell under another broader category.
Do you feel like that you could work that into a goal based on the conversation about that piece there, to add a goal? Is that? It's okay to
Sure.
Don't say it.
Okay. Like, here's what I'm thinking. We're doing this work now.
Yep.
And I, at this point, then I would have to sort of define and measure and make it time sensitive, how this is all going to look. And I can go back and try to do that. But when I do this, that means that it puts more work on Mr. Lebrad and on Carla Burley and on the building principals. And because they're the people who kind of help me go through these kinds of goals. And I am happy to do that. We just need to know that I feel like we're doing it, but if we're going to make it very formal, then we can formalize it if that will make us feel better.
Is it a viable option to say, okay, well, we have the goals for the year, and know that this is a goal that we'd like to have put in the go forward. So when we come back, I dare say in a year, that it's worked into the bigger goals that would, I just don't want it to feel rushed.
Could, instead of being a goal, could it simply be the school committee would like to take the temperature in the district just for our own edification?
So that could be part of our goals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
we want to take
Yeah.
the temperature. It's too, it doesn't quite fit nicely into a superintendent's goal package. Because it can't,
Yeah.
your goal can't be to make sure everybody's happy.
No, I think
Our goal can be to take the temperature.
Right, but so
Yes.
Dr. Kavanaugh this year has a professional practice goal. And the professional practice goal is sort of like a lot of this, but really just students. And it's possible, I would think, that maybe for next year, or this year, I don't know, but we could, because I think last year, maybe it was last year, the professional practice goal, or maybe it was 2 years ago, was team building among the admin team coming out of COVID. So the professional practice goal is often more on like how we're working together kind of thing, so maybe that is a place where we can add, and again, I don't think it's accountability for, I think it's, are you monitoring, how are you ensuring that the climate is, that we're building the climate in the direction of the definition that we've chosen, like that we're meeting the standard that we've set.
All right. What if we put something in there that was sort of a goal light, right? We'll formalize it. But at this point, it will really just be temperature taking toward that standard.
That you already do. I mean, maybe it's just reporting it. I mean,
That's right.
doesn't even have to be
that
net
would be
new.
doable, yeah. A sort of temperature taking process toward how close are we getting to that definition of climate?
How do people feel?
Sounds good to me.
I feel like I would want to give you a
Next
chance to chew on
Yes,
this, though. I
to
mean,
chew
this
on
is
it
like a
and
good,
to
happy,
find
creative.
the words
Yeah.
that don't create a whole different thing, but fit in with what we're talking about here, taking the temperature.
And maybe it is an indicator, as like maybe it maybe it's both, or maybe, we highlight it in those spaces. Or we table it and we put it as one of our activities, but I am reluctant personally to if we already have surveys and processes, it's sometimes hard to overlay a different one on top. So,
Yeah, let me add this as a goal light, and I will come back with temperature checks. How are we getting toward that goal, that definition? And I think that if nothing else this year, it will get us data.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so this will be, I think, by the next meeting?
Thank
I do want to
No,
get.
I can do that.
Okay, but if not, it's okay. I hate to push it too far out for you.
I was thinking.
So if you need another meeting beyond that, because you got other stuff.
That'd be great.
but,
We can get at it.
Yeah.
Okay, it is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it is almost 9:50, so I do want to try to, can we go ahead with the policy GBEB, which is staff conduct? This is a third reading. We did receive some feedback. I don't know if people saw that email that had come to us and to Dr. Kavanaugh today. It also, the last time we had this discussion, we did not have the red line copy in front of us. The
Yes.
conversation was a little bit different, but do you want to
Sure.
open that conversation?
Yeah, so many school districts actually have a policy, GBEB, talking about staff conduct. We did look at it without it being redlined. The very first paragraph of this really does come right out of Mass General Law. So that's sort of a non-negotiable, right? I mean, if the law says we have to do it, we have to do it. The red that you see in the second paragraph is something that has been recently added. That was added by our attorney, Michelle McNulty.
The red paragraph.
The red paragraph, yep, that did not exist after the policy working group left this. Michelle has also redlined some of the things in the third paragraph. And then if we take a look at the paragraph with the purple in it, that's stuff I think that the policy working group had put together. When you go to all of the numbered expectations that exist on page 2, those all come out of the employee handbook. So people in our district are already working to those. So, those are nothing new, which means that they've already been at some point negotiated. So I did want to talk about the Massachusetts Teacher Association rep said a few things about this policy. One is that the word fighting, which
Number 8.
exists in number 8, that word is something that she deemed vague language and is not quite sure what fighting means in that context. One concern of the MTA is that this policy might limit free speech rights of staff. And then a third thing she said is that this would need to be bargained with the HTA, and we know that. I mean, our legal counsel has said that this would have to be bargained with the HTA. Some of the good news, I think, about bargaining this, if they ask us to do so, is that this language really already exists in a document that we have negotiated with them. So, you probably don't want to vote on this tonight if that question has already been raised, and so I should probably reach out to we'll probably have Michelle McNulty just reach out to the MTA rep and then start that process of discussion around bargaining.
Yeah.
We kind of had that conversation though about how that is kind of vague language at the last time we discussed it. So I think we're kind of on the same page with them in like a very hopeful, aspirational way of thinking of it.
Okay, so I would agree that I would not want to vote on this with that outstanding piece to figure out the bargaining piece.
Correct.
And that would be not just for clarification for those at home, I believe what the reference is bargaining to get an MOA or an MOU in place specific to this policy, not part of our 3-year contract bargaining. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Did we receive any other feedback on the policy? No. Okay.
Well, right, because it is, except for number 20, I think we added, which just says you're required to implement the curriculum frameworks. Everything else, like Dr. Kavanaugh said, is in the handbook that has been followed for years.
Right.
We just haven't had we haven't had any GBB. We haven't had any policy at all, so we were reflecting the handbook with a few.
I guess it could be just summarized as, instead of listing everything, just reference the page or reference the handbook.
The reason we didn't do that is because the community can't see it. And so
Oh, okay.
by
All right.
making it policy and
Then they can
light,
see it.
this,
Okay.
people can understand
Okay.
what the handbook says. Otherwise, we can't see it.
So if this is consistent with our handbooks, it's not truly a change in working conditions.
Right.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any other comments on this iteration? Appreciate the work of the policy working group. You guys always carry a significant load. All right, the school committee ethics policy, also a third reading. Dr. Kavanaugh, if you want to.
I think this is ours.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is
Oh,
the one
okay, you're right. You know what?
that Amanda is the
My-
expert in.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
Susan and I had a good time with this, actually, very nice. And this is, we've read this many times. The only reason, I think the only reason we didn't vote it at the working session is because we didn't want to vote anything that wasn't, on camera.
Correct.
So I haven't heard any feedback from, I wouldn't, but committee members, I don't know, if someone doesn't like anything in here, we should address it. But this is, it hasn't changed since we first brought it forward.
Is there a procedure that goes with this? Like, is this a policy that kind of lives all by itself?
This one was all by itself. This is just ethics.
So my question would be if like a community member believes that one of us has violated one of these ethical principles or what have you, what is the recourse for that? Like, what do they do with that? Do we have like?
I have to look at our community concerns policy, which has the escalation procedures. Is there one for school committee?
I don't know. I didn't find one that specifically dealt, because I was thinking about like, if somebody thinks that we are not acting in an ethical way in our positions in the community, what do they do? Right?
They typically tell us.
Well, they do. They certainly do. But I'm saying, like, is there any sort of procedural policy, like a procedure that goes with it? Like, what happens if they're mad at us? They're just mad at us, and that's the end. Sorry, but
It does happen from time to time.
Does it?
That's an interesting question. Wait, let me just scan through with that in mind for a second.
And I didn't see anything specific, but that does not mean it does not exist.
I mean, honestly, I suppose they could call for a recall. I mean, we're
Yes,
elected, that's the
it is
thing.
possible to have
That
a
is
recall
actually,
election.
that is what if somebody felt that there was a severe violation of conduct or ethics, based on what we've seen, what we know to be a tool, we are elected, so we serve at the will, based on the votes of the community, so I think there is a process to do a recall.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the extreme.
Yeah,
Short
yeah.
of that, I think we just hear about it.
Yeah.
We hear
A
about
lot.
it, and short of a recall, there is waiting till the next election cycle or
Right.
to not. Unlike some of the appointed groups, we're not subject to another board or committee's
Yeah.
authority, so that it,
Right.
I think, to my knowledge, would be the voters.
And we don't have hierarchy among us.
Right.
We have our administrative chair. But in terms of like somebody who's in charge,
Yeah, there wouldn't
not
be somebody
really,
who
we're
reported
flat.
to.
Right.
I just
So-
tell another person.
Right, so if a complaint came through about me, I would imagine the four of you would discuss it.
It is possible legally to have a committee censure one of its members. I don't know the process for that, but I have seen that in other communities. I don't know that it actually carries any weight, because as a committee, we can't decide. I mean, you could try to vote me off if you wanted.
Please, do you want us to come up with a procedure?
No, it was just a question
Okay.
of like, because what would that even be? Like, we have a conversation with them, like, it's not,
Well, that's just
Well,
it.
right, yeah.
'cause-
And I do think that historically, we have tried to be responsive to community members and tried to.
It would probably be the kind of thing you would also take up in an executive session.
But I don't think so.
I don't think that allows
No.
exemption to the executive, for the executive session.
You'd want to, but it would be out here in the open probably.
Yeah.
So there,
I feel like community forums kind of address that in a way, right? Because we have an open comment.
Yep.
Kind of addresses
Public
that
forum.
in a way, like, I guess. Yeah, it doesn't need to exist, I just wondering if it did.
okay, is there anything that we want to hold this policy to bring back for, or people feel we're on the school committee ethics policy? Or do people feel comfortable with this the way it is?
I think it's a good.
I think
We
it's
have
good
it
to-
already. This policy we already have, and we are modifying it, updating it. So that's why the red is new, but the black exists already.
And I think it's an important policy to have and to look at from time to time. I think the public has a right to expect a certain level of ethics and
Ethical.
behaviors from elected leaders.
And we from each other.
And we from each
It's
other.
really, because I mean, some of these things like keeping things in executive session that are privileged in executive, we would be the ones who would know. We sort of would police each other according to this policy.
All right.
I'm happy to vote it, but if anyone wants to wait, we can wait.
I read it previously, so I would be happy to vote it.
Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the school committee member ethics policy BCA as amended in the packet.
Okay, so motion by Holly. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Adam. All those in favor? Aye. Any abstain or opposed? Okay, so that is unanimous and so passes. All right, so we have a final three items on our, or final two, because the district evaluation we're going to wait on. The school committee goals and the superintendent's evaluation format. I do want to check in with people to see if people feel like you have the bandwidth to go through all of it, or if we want to bring any of it back.
I'd like to put the goals off.
I was thinking that my mind might not be quite sharp enough to.
I'm not there.
Yeah.
Superintendent's evaluation format. Do we want to discuss that? Okay.
Okay, if everybody else.
So the question that we had been looking at was whether we wanted to evaluate on an annual basis, which is how we have been doing things, or going to an every other evaluation process. And part of the thinking, I don't want to, stop me if I miscaptured this, but part of the thinking was that because it's such a lengthy process, it would allow us to pay attention to some other things as well. We held the vote on this because we wanted to have a little bit of the conversation on the district evaluation, I think was the reason why we held this initially. Is that an accurate memory? I guess for me personally, and I'm, again, just one of five, I don't think one is, cancels the other out. I do think that we have the ability to do both. I think one thing that swayed me to want to keep with the annual evaluation was that Dr. Kavanaugh herself had expressed wanting to be evaluated on an annual basis. That was mine.
Must be a glutton for punishment.
I feel like anybody who would want to go through that every year would be. But what are other thoughts?
I would defer to the person being evaluated, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if I certainly think that Dr. Kavanaugh wants to be evaluated every year, and that's the process that we already have in place. I think just continuing with that process makes sense. You know, I think it would be a different story if, you know, we were saying we want to evaluate every year, and she was saying, oh, no, we want to do it every 2 years. Then we have that sort of dichotomy there.
Right.
I like it every 2 years.
Every 2 years or
I'm sorry, every year. I like doing, you know, obviously what Dr. Kavanaugh wants. As someone who's trying to learn from evaluations and grow, if you yourself want that feedback every year, I think that we owe it to Dr. Kavanaugh to give it to her. My personal feeling. I also think it gives us a chance to like really look at those goals every year and the indicators, because we're, you know, rather than setting them now and evaluating over 2 years, we can actually pivot in a year if we want. So I like it the way it is personally.
Okay, so I think we have consensus. Is that accurate? And I don't think, because we're not making a change, it doesn't require an actual vote. The district evaluation, we are going to come back to. And then, do people have any future agenda items that we have not already put on our list of things we want to discuss?
A request to discuss buses and bus safety.
Okay.
A report on it, or
Yeah, I mean,
how we handle it?
well, I think the question was, how are we ensuring the safety of our kiddos? And I know, I've seen a presentation before. Maybe I dreamed it. Did I see? I did that. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the request, because I think, you know, every year parents are like, these buses look crowded, and sometimes people have experiences. It's like, how are we ensuring our students are staying safe on the buses?
Well, you know, I can't speak to numbers specifically, but anecdotally, it does sound like the buses are a little more crowded, but we were not able to get an additional bus that we had.
We knew
tried
that
to-
coming into the year, right?
Yeah.
Every bus has a camera in it, correct?
2,
2 cameras.
front and back.
All right. Stereophonic discipline. All right. Catch him doing it both ways. I like that.
Future agenda, listening board.
Oh, yes.
And it doesn't have to be the next meeting, but I don't want it to fall off the
Yep,
list.
that's also part of our goal discussion too, so
Oh,
that
good,
that
that's
will
right.
go nicely together with that. All right. Anything else that pops up in people's minds, feel free to email between now and.
My pillow.
That
Not that one.
that moves us into items by consensus.
I know, line, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
Amen.
I think you meant so moved.
So moved.
Okay, so a motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstain? Okay, that's great. Is there anybody interested in entertaining a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion by Susan, a second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we are adjourned at 10:05 PM. Thank you all for hanging in for a lengthier than some meetings, and for all of the great information we had tonight. Thanks. Have a good night.